The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here with you 3 until 6 p.m. on GB News. And here's what I've got on the menu for this hour. Breaking news not so long ago. Rishi Sunak under investigation by the parliamentary watchdog. We'll bring you the very latest on that. Yeah, we'll find out a bit more on it. Also, why aren't we having enough babies? Apparently, we've got a baby-making crisis, ladies and gentlemen. I delve into the reasons why people are having fewer and fewer children and why it could be a massive problem for us going forward. In other news as well, of course, we are going to be doing rather a lot on this particular show today about whether or not there should be more prominence given to anti-monarchy protesters. And as well as that, get a load of this, Banau Briclo is the new name for the Brecon Beacons, or the original name for the Brecon Beacons, depending on which way that you want to look at it. And we're talking about exactly why the Brecon Beacons have essentially been cancelled. Bit weird, I know. And this is a big one for us as well. The Grand National, people love it, some people hate it. 3 horses died during the Grand National. There were protests. Who actually killed the horses? Is it the fact that they were entered into the race, or is it the fact that there were protests before it and it disrupted them? We'll get stuck into all of that and much, much more. Patrick Christys on GB News. Yes, and Rishi Sunak thinks it's of vital importance that we all learn more maths. Now, maths is an absolutely terrible subject for me. Like people have dyslexia with words, I've basically got that with numbers. And so very kindly, my producers have decided that I need to solve maths problems live on air. Later on, I'll be putting a tricky question to you guys and see if you can get the answer right on that. GBviews at gbnews.uk, though. I want to hear from you. Why are we not having more babies? OK? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, here's your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It is 2 minutes past 3. I'm Aaron Armstrong from the GB Newsroom. The launch of Elon Musk's Starship, the world's most powerful rocket, has been postponed. It was due to take off from SpaceX's Starbase facility in Texas earlier, but was called off at the last minute because of a technical issue. A frozen pressure valve. The team continue with the dress rehearsal instead. Musk says they'll retry in a few days' time. Musk had played down the chances of success earlier, admitting anything that doesn't result in the destruction of the launch pad would be a win. Rishi Sunak's under investigation by Parliament's ethics watchdog over a possible failure to declare an interest. Downing Street says the inquiry is over, claims he failed to tell MPs his wife, Akshata Murthy, might benefit from a major measure announced in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says the Prime Minister will clarify how it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's accepted the UK doesn't have enough teachers to deliver on his ambition to improve children's numeracy skills. Rishi Sunak launched his policy earlier to improve their skills, saying anti-maths mindsets are costing the UK economy tens of billions of pounds every year. Well, the Prime Minister's announced a review of the subject in England so more pupils can leave school with core skills, which could include a new maths qualification. He says children are being at risk of being left behind in the jobs market without a solid foundation in maths, although says this won't happen overnight.
The UK is one of the least numerate countries in the developed world. More than 8 million adults have numeracy skills below those expected of a 9-year-old. And around a third of our young people don't pass maths GCSE. We make jokes about not being able to do maths. It's socially acceptable. We say things like, oh, maths, I can't do that, it's not for me, and everyone laughs. But we'd never make a joke like that about not being able to read.
The NHS is being accused of shocking waste after research found it was spending more than £1 million a week on private ambulances for emergency calls. The Unison trade union says its figures are based on responses from 2/3 of ambulance trusts in England. It says more than a dozen private companies have been plugging holes to meet response times amid overwhelming demand. The Health Department says it's working to improve ambulance waiting times. Hillary Clinton's urged politicians in Northern Ireland to return to power sharing, saying the Windsor framework provides a path forward. She was speaking at the opening of a 3-day conference at Queen's University in Belfast to mark the 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement. Ms Clinton praised the deal as a true triumph of diplomacy, but says peace and prosperity are incomplete without a functioning power-sharing government in Stormont.
You know we are at a standstill with the Northern Ireland Assembly no longer functioning. But the Windsor Agreement provides a path forward, not just for convening, but for positioning Northern Ireland as an economic hub for global trade and investment through privileged access to the UK and all of its trading partners.
Meanwhile, more than 5,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year. GB News can exclusively reveal around 120 people have arrived today, with 3 small boats intercepted by authorities. A surge in small boat crossings have taken place recently as people smuggling gangs take advantage of better weather conditions. A British-Russian critic of the Kremlin has been sentenced to 25 years in prison in Russia for speaking out about the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Kara-Murza has been found guilty of treason and for spreading false information about the Russian army. He denies the allegations against him. It is one of the harshest sentences of its kind since Russia invaded its neighbour. A French court's cleared the European plane maker Airbus and the airline Air France of involuntary manslaughter nearly 14 years after a plane travelling from Brazil to France crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The trial was the first in France for corporate manslaughter, with both firms pleading not guilty. It found several acts of negligence by both companies, but it wasn't enough for full liability for the crash. 228 people died on the flight travelling from Rio to Paris in June '09. This is GB News. More as it happens, but now it's over to Patrick.
Yes, welcome along, everybody. Happy Monday. It's me, Patrick Christys, here on GB News. And I start today with the story that broke around lunchtime. And Rishi Sunak is being investigated by Parliament's standards watchdog. So the Prime Minister is now facing allegations of a possible failure to declare the shares his wife holds in a childcare agency, which was boosted by the budget. Let's speak now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, on this straight away, who is at Westminster for us. Darren, thank you very much. How serious is this?
Well, it's pretty serious in the sense that it's not often, maybe we've got a little bit too used to it, that current Prime Ministers are investigated by standards commissioners. In saying that, we don't really know the full detail of all of this, not least of all because one of the seemingly concerns around all of this is that lots of the information isn't necessarily in the public domain. That, as the Commissioner herself said, it is not necessarily been, or the Prime Minister doesn't seem to have been frank and open about that information. This relates to paragraph 6 of the conduct of the Code of Conduct for MPs, in which they say that members must always be open and frank in declaring any relevant interest when it comes to the House of Commons and its committees and in communications with ministers. Now, this all relates back to the Liaison Committee last week. That's the committee of MPs that questions the Prime Minister from time to time. And he was asked about whether potentially there is a conflict of interest in the fact that his wife seems to own shares in a childcare company. Now, the changes to the budget means that clearly those companies could benefit in the future from the extra government provision. Now, in saying that, Downing Street are batting this away this afternoon. They say they're going to commit to working with the Standards Commissioner, but they also argue they have been transparent about the information in the past. That has not stopped Labour and the Lib Dems from piling in. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Labour leader, Patrick, this afternoon, saying that there is a transparency black hole when it comes to all of this, enabling the Prime Minister and those he's appointed to dodge proper scrutiny of their affairs. The Lib Dems have said that this looks like the Prime Minister is allegedly bending the rules. As I say, though, that's all strongly denied by Number 10. In the end, we're going to have to wait for this investigation to be carried out to find out whether the Prime Minister has broken any rules here. But it's, as I say, frankly, not a good look, and not a good look just a couple of weeks ahead of those local elections in England.
Darren, thank you. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor in Westminster. But now, to fears that the UK economy is going to suffer serious damage because of the declining birth rate. Apparently, we are not having enough babies. So it's down by 12% in the last 10 years. Viewers on GB News will now be able to see the number of births having fallen down the years. And the Office for National Statistics monitors the total fertility rate, which shows the average number of children that each woman has. So in 1964, apparently, it peaked at 2.93 children per woman in England and Wales, so nearly 3. But in 2020, that was as low as 1.58, before rising slightly to 1.61 in 2021. Concerns here is that, obviously, it takes a couple to make a baby, and we're not replacing ourselves, are we, if we're not having at least 2.1 children? I was asking you why you think this is at home, OK? And we've had a variety of different suggestions coming in. But earlier on, I decided to go out and about, and I went to the Lindo Wings. It's that really famous maternity ward where a procession of royal babies have been welcomed into the world, haven't they? And I wanted to see what the good, ordinary members of the public think is to blame for our low birth rate.
That's the reason why some of them don't have any kids. Yeah, because they need more money, need planning to have kids. But in our generation, we didn't think about money.
You just cracked on.
Yeah. I see.
I would say that immigration policy needs to be fixed a little bit, especially because there's plenty of people. The population on the globe is, rising higher and higher at higher rates every single day.
Do you think they would feel able to afford to have kids then, or maybe?
No, but it's not that the population as a globe, we call ourselves a global economy, is decreasing. It's just the economy that we're in at the moment in this country. I mean, no one can buy a house right now, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm 24 years old. The idea of owning a house, being financially stable enough to have kids seems way, way off, probably decades away. And I just don't see myself being able to give a kid that kind of life that they need.
Because I think people are probably more career-driven. And they just, they just want to focus on themselves more and then build themselves where they can get to a better place in their life, and then maybe they might then have kids. But, or people are just probably full of themselves and everyone's trying to pick their partners wisely. No.
Oh, do you think this is part? Do you think things like Tinder have had an impact on this?
Yes, because people are so easily accessible to other people now, so everyone probably feels like they're spoilt for choice.
I think it's just because compared to before, women are more career-oriented. They want to develop themselves professionally, marry later, and to be fair, kids go in the way of work. And
Can I ask, why did you decide to have a child?
Because I want to make the families.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
OK, well, there we go. So those are the views of the variety of different people I interviewed outside of that maternity hospital there. A mixed bag and a mixed set of reasons as to why a lot of people aren't having a load of kids. But will the lack of babies impact our economy in the long run? That's what I want to know. And with me to sort all of this mess out is Liam Halligan, GB News economics and business editor with On the Money. Why aren't we having enough babies, Liam?
Well, Patrick, I think a lot of the reason is because of housing, and I've written about this for many, many years. Let me just give you some numbers here. In 1991, 2/3 of 25 to 34-year-olds owned their own place, 2/3. By 2016, it was less than 40%, it was 38%. It's now less than 30%. We've got 2/5 of 21 to 30-year-olds living with their parents. Now, what does that mean? It means that when people don't have a secure home to either rent or preferably to buy, they don't want to have kids. And this is a major factor why our demography is being undermined, with people not having as many children as they did. Yes, of course, a lot of women in particular are leaving it later to have a family. But in some senses, that's because it's almost impossible to buy a home in most parts of the country unless you're both earning lots of money. So for me, housing is the everything problem.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to understand knife crime, it's a lot of it for me is bad housing. If you want to understand broken families, a lot of it is bad housing. If you want to understand why people are so stressed out all the time, because they have to work so hard to afford a house that is worse than the house where they grew up. With the current generation being less well off than their parents. A lot of it comes down to housing, and I believe that housing, a lack of secure housing, is the main reason why our demography is being undermined.
Yeah, absolutely. And from the people I spoke to there, housing, absolutely, just general affordability. Someone did come up with, well, there's the women being more career-driven as well, so there is that side of it. Someone also did mention Tinder as well, which I think is interesting, because the society has changed and the way that we date has changed, and there's potentially a perception that there's more options. I mean, Tinder and apps like that are like a meat market, aren't they, as opposed to before, where you might just have to make do with whoever was living in your village. So I suppose there's a difference there.
I think there is a difference. There are cultural differences. There's, you know, the roles of women as traditionally passive people, of course, have been completely blown up. Rightly so, I think we'd both agree. But for me, it comes down to infrastructure. It's so expensive to rent a place. It's so expensive to buy a place in many parts of the country. More people are living with their parents. It's harder for people at a young age to get together, form a home and do what comes naturally.
And do what comes naturally, there we go. With that in mind, what's coming naturally with our GDP figures, Liam?
So it's been quite an interesting day, Patrick. There's been so many gloomy forecasts around, and I've been broadcasting throughout the day here on GB News saying that the Ernst & Young Item Club, which is like an economic think tank in the financial services company, they've changed their GDP estimate for this year from minus 0.7, right, to plus 0.2.
OK. Yeah.
So that's a big change. And you know, the Bank of England, the Office of Budget Responsibility, all these folks who are predicting recession, doom and gloom, they're now starting saying, actually, the UK economy is not doing too badly. And on that front, GB News viewers and listeners may remember that last week they saw many headlines across many broadcasters and many newspapers. The UK is the worst performing economy in the G7 because this year the IMF thinks still that we're going to contract by 0.3%. Well, I've got a chart for you, Patrick.
There we go.
And here is the chart. This is the chart that wasn't shown by broadcasters last week. This is a chart of what actually happened. These are IMF numbers of what actually happened last year in terms of our GDP. Not a forecast for this year. No, so this is a fact rather than a forecast. And what this graphic shows for GB News radio listeners is on the left, you've got the UK grew by 4% last year, faster than Italy, 3.7%, faster than Canada, 3.4%, faster than France, 2.6%, faster than the US, 2.1%, faster than Germany, 1.8%, faster than Japan, 1.1%.
In other words, hearing this stuff?
In other words, the UK was the fastest growing economy in the G7. Now, there's a rider there. That's partly because we were bouncing back because we had a steeper dip during lockdown, but we did most of our bouncing back in 2021. In 2022, we were the fastest growing economy in the G7. That's what that IMF report said last week. Fact. The IMF, which has a terrible forecasting record, 25 of its last 28 forecasts on the UK have been too gloomy.
People listen to them.
They were saying we were going to grow by less than any other G7 economy this year, and that is, you know, the headline.
Yeah.
And no one reported that.
Well, there we go. Well, this is it. This is why we exist, and this is why you exist. Thank you very much, Liam Halligan. There we go. Talking of low birth rates, I'm glad you were born. Liam Halligan, our economics.
It was close.
and business editor with On the Money. Right, OK. So we will be hearing how the Prime Minister wants the UK to be better at maths. So I've got a challenge for you now. If 1 equals... This is the first time I've seen this. If 1 equals 3, 2 equals 3, 3 equals 5, 4 equals 4 and 5 equals 4, then what does 6 equal? Don't say it, Liam. What does 6 equal? OK, so you've got that in your mind? You got it all in your mind? Right. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's very confusing news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News.
Welcome back now to the migrant crisis, and we've hit a landmark today, ladies and gentlemen. We've hit a big landmark. GB News can reveal that more than 5,000 people have now crossed the channel on small boats so far this year. Viewers can see some of the migrants who arrived at Dover this morning, so that's today's images of Dover. Around 120 people have crossed the channel today. Home Office figures show that 37 people arrived on just one boat, which obviously is a rather large number. And that was yesterday, though. Last year, a record number of 45,755 migrants crossed the channel, but sources have told GB News that the Home Office officials are planning for the possibility of that number doubling this year. So those were images from today, and we've hit the 5,000 mark now, ladies and gentlemen. So there we go. Anyway, well, the news of the investigation into the Prime Minister has overshadowed his call for pupils to study maths right up to the age of 18 when they leave school. Now, in a speech this morning, he said that his plans will help bring maths to life, which I think is a particularly hard thing. I'm just going to put my cards on the table here and say I was always absolutely terrible at maths. Whatever people have with letters and words with dyslexia, I've basically got that for numbers, OK? And actually, to be honest with you, it's quite embarrassing, which is why my production team, upon telling them that, decided that it would be a great laugh for everyone to, live on national television, give me some pretty basic maths questions to answer and watch me flounder, and everyone can realise the mask will slip. And if you didn't already think I was a complete and utter thicko, then you will, probably within the next 20 minutes. But Rishi Sunak thinks it's a key skill set, every bit as essential as reading, which I also struggle with sometimes. But opposition parties say that he's guilty of getting his sums wrong, as there aren't enough maths teachers to achieve his ambition. Here's what he had to say.
We're in the process of making maths more accessible, building our children's confidence so that they don't fear maths. We're creating more sector-specific content that can excite young people about the relevance of maths for the careers that they aspire to help teachers bring maths to life in the classroom. From building sets for school plays to calculating the angles of free kicks or the speed of a Formula One car. We're extending our maths hubs, unique partnerships of expert schools that support maths teaching. And we're strengthening maths in primary schools, including with a new, fully funded professional qualification for those that are teaching it. But we also need to address a very specific problem that's causing us to fall behind the rest of the world. We're one of the few developed countries where young people don't routinely study some form of maths up to the age of 18. They do it in Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Finland, Japan, Norway, and America. Why should we accept any less for our children? Of course we shouldn't. That's why I set out in January that we're going to change the way our system works, so that everyone in our country will study some form of maths all the way to 18.
He's banging on about maths again, isn't he? Is this really the way to win votes? I'm not sure it is. Neil certainly doesn't. Is this the best that he can do with Boris Johnson's 80-seat majority? Out of touch to a whole new level. Neil, look, I'm inclined to agree with you. I always fell asleep at the back of the maths class. I was in set 9 out of 9. But maybe I am wrong about this, because I suppose it would be better for me to be a maths whiz. Joining me now is TV personality and legend, it must be said, Johnny Ball. Johnny, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well indeed.
Now, I imagine that you've had a lifetime of putting up with thickos like me when it comes to maths. And the line that I would always wheel out, Johnny, would be, well, I've never had to use algebra or trigonometry in my day-to-day life, but I'm wrong about this, aren't I?
Not necessarily. No, it's the problem. The problem is that we've been teaching. I've just listened to Rishi Sunak for the first time, and what he says is absolutely right. Learning about the angles you kick a football at is still maths, but it's sport as well. So that's what he's talking about, involving maths and bringing maths to the fore in all the other subjects. And here, I think he's absolutely right.
Why is it so important, Johnny? Why should people get excited about maths?
It's essential to everybody for life, it really is. But what's been gone wrong is over many years, education ministers have said, I know, I'll weaken the curriculum slightly, and that way I'll get better figures next year, and they'll think I've done better educationally. And of course, that has failed. When I did my programs around 1980, we studied how people did maths, and in Singapore, they had the best mathematical turnout in the whole world. And when we looked at it, they were using old British maths books, which were now stuck on the shelf and we didn't use. We'd moved on, but sadly, we'd reduced our maths.
OK, look, we've got to liven maths up, Johnny, OK? We've got to liven it up, because when I hear the word maths, it makes me want to drop off to sleep or walk into the sea or something like that. I have a total mental block. How do we make maths sexy, Johnny?
There are so many things. First of all, you should teach more geometry. The Greeks were the greatest maths nation ever, and they didn't do numeracy. They didn't even give their numbers names.
I'm half Greek.
One was A, two was B, three was C. But they did geometry, and with geometry you could really understand so much more.
Johnny, I tell you what, I wish you had been my maths teacher. I really do, because I would have been
I
great.
never was a maths teacher.
I know, but I just wish you had been. I'm just saying, I just wish you had been, because actually, to be honest with you, I might have paid more attention. You are gripping and a maths whiz. Thank you very much. TV personality Johnny Ball there, the legend himself. Right, OK. So here is the moment of the show that I've been absolutely dreading. Maths, in case you couldn't tell, is not my strongest area, it has to be said. So my producer, Steve, decided it would be a good idea to give me an on-air maths challenge. Now, I promise you that I've not seen these questions. I genuinely haven't, although it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference anyway. So here goes. Question 1, and please answer these. What is the surface area of the cube shown? Oh, OK, all right. So the diagram shows a cube with one side length as 2 centimetres. So do I not times 2 by... Oh, I hate this. Do I not times 2 by 4? And then no? Is that not it? Is that right? So I'm going to go 8. It's 6. So the cube has 6 faces. So the surface area of the whole cube is 6 times 4, which is 24 centimetres squared, right? OK, let's move on. Question 2. Jamie... Oh, I used to hate these ones. Jamie goes on holiday to Florida. The exchange rate is £1 to $1.70. He changes £900 into dollars. How many dollars does he get? Well, I mean, look, I haven't got a calculator in front of me right now, but I would imagine, would I not just do 900 times 1.7? And then that would... No, and then that gives me the exchange rate. I'm desperately looking over it on newsreader on Armstrong here, who's not allowed to talk to me. So the answer is 1,530. Yeah, so multiply $1.70 by 900. Yeah, I was right. There you go. See, I could have done that. OK, right. All right. So 3,600 will be the sum as 3,000 plus 600. I don't even know what that's all about. All right, so OK, so I've got to admit, I'm not the brightest spark in the maths box when it comes to those numbers. But what about you? I want to see if you can solve this one at home, right? Hannah deposits £800 into a bank, which pays 4.5% simple interest a year. Work out what interest the bank pays over 3 years. I'll give you that one more time. Hannah deposits £800 into a bank, which pays 4.5% simple interest a year. Work out what interest the bank pays over 3 years. Answers at the end of this hour, just before the 4 o'clock news. So you now have half an hour to answer that. And can I just apologise to everybody who is at home now thinking, what the flipping heck is this guy doing? How much of an idiot is he? Yeah, you're right, I can't do it. Maybe this is why Rishi Sunak is right about the idea that more kids have to do maths so they don't turn out like just to be a gob on a stick like me. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Anyway, I've got loads more coming your way between now and 4 o'clock. Hopefully no more maths, because that was excruciating. The Brecon Beacons is one of the most beautiful parts of the UK. I will tell you why it's got a new name. And wish me luck when I try to pronounce it. This is a challenge Christys, this whole show, isn't it? And things go from bad to worse for Nicola Sturgeon, as calls for her to be suspended by the SNP get even louder. What a mess. But first, it's your latest headlines with Aaron Armstrong, who's a maths whiz.
I promise you that's not the case. It is 3:31. Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. SpaceX has called off the launch of the world's most powerful rocket, Starship. It was due to take off this afternoon for the first time, but has been postponed after a pressure valve became frozen. The team, based in Texas, continued with a dress rehearsal instead. A minimum of 48 hours will be needed before a second attempt can go ahead. Earlier, Elon Musk, who owns SpaceX, tried to temper expectations by saying anything that doesn't result in the destruction of the launch pad would be a win. Rishi Sunak's under investigation by Parliament's ethics watchdog over a possible failure to declare an interest. Downing Street says the inquiries over claims he failed to tell MPs his wife, Akshata Murthy, might benefit from a major measure announced in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to get more people to become childminders. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will clarify how it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says poor numeracy and an anti-maths mindset is costing the UK economy tens of billions of pounds every year. He is setting up a review to ensure maths is studied by all students in England up to the age of 18. without making it a compulsory A-level. He's also criticised the culture that it's OK to be bad at maths, claiming it leaves people twice as likely to be unemployed than those who have competent skills. A French court has cleared European plane maker Airbus and the airline Air France of involuntary manslaughter, nearly 14 years after a plane travelling from Brazil to France crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The trial was France's first ever for corporate manslaughter, with both firms pleading not guilty. It did find several acts of negligence by both companies, but that wasn't enough for full liability of the crash. 228 people lost their lives on the flight from Rio to Paris in June 2009. TV online, DAB and TuneIn Radio. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Quick snapshot of the markets today. The pound will buy you $1.2374 and €1.1329. The price of gold is £1,610 and 62 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,883 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
OK, let's go live now to Belfast, where they are still marking the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. So I believe we're going to play you some footage now. Hillary Clinton is chairing a panel discussion at Queen's University. That is Bill Clinton, for what it's worth. He's also there, obviously, which has some of the key figures involved in that peace deal. Tony Blair, whose face I think you can just see on the left. Yes, you can. On the left of the screen there. And the former Irish Prime Minister Bertie Ahern and Bill Clinton himself. They are at Queen's University, Belfast. So they are doing a bit of a Q&A, and they're talking about, of course, their involvement in the Good Friday Agreement, 25 years since that peace deal. So that's happening right now. OK, back to me. The Brecon Beacons are no more. I know. The national park has been renamed because of its links to wood-burning, carbon-emitting beacons. Now, normally, when things get renamed, it is like links to the slave trade or links to, you know, something absolutely catastrophically awful. But this is to do with links to wood-burning, carbon-emitting beacons. Managers decided that the image of wood-burning braziers is no longer appropriate as they try to make the area net zero by 2035. It is now known by the Welsh name, and can I just apologise to any Welsh people out there? Banau Brychinog. Joining me now is James Evans, who's the member of the Senate for Brecon and Radnorshire. Thank you very, very much. How was my pronunciation?
Pretty good, actually. Banau Brychinog. You're pretty good, but need to work on the Brychinog.
I do. And no doubt people will be asking me to do that throughout the course of the show. So, look, I read this headline and I thought, this is a bit weird. Should we really be cancelling something for its links to burning stuff?
Well, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? You know, when I meet with a national park in my constituency, when I ask them to help build more houses for local people, they've got a key part of that in the planning process. When I ask them to help our town centres, which are really struggling, when I ask them to do numbers of different things to help local residents, I get met with the same response. We'd love to, but we've got no money to do that. And now all you see is the national park splurging money on a rebrand of an organisation which didn't need to be rebranded in the first place. There was nothing wrong with calling it the Brecon Beacons National Park. It's always been known with that. It's always been known as the Brecon Beacons, and yet again they're changing things here just to fit a type of culture war.
Well, didn't they say that it was against their ethos? They want to go net zero, and the idea that it would have had wood-burning beacons at the top of it is against their moral code of ethics.
Well, burning wood to me is not one of the major ways we emit carbon into the atmosphere. But to me, a beacon is a beacon of light, a beacon of hope, and it's something that people like to resonate to is a beacon. So getting that away is terrible. If you look at the new logo, it actually looks like a fence in front of the mountains. We'd actually try and we're closed for business. No, thank you very much. Don't come here anymore.
Okay.
So it's not great. And I think when tourists come and visit the Brecon Beacons, which all the businesses in my part of the world rely on, I think they're going to get lost and don't even know where they're going to go.
It is undeniably a more Welsh name, though. Are you happy about that?
Yeah, well, I say I've got no issue with the Welsh language. I'm quite proud to promote the Welsh language wherever I go. But I think to rename something and rebrand it is going to be very, very confusing for the Welsh public, for the public coming into Wales on holidays. And I just do not think this was an appropriate use of money when it could be spent better off elsewhere.
And forgive me, was there a massive clamour for this?
No.
No.
No, I've been in post now since 2021. I don't know, my predecessor was in post, the MP was in post since 2017. And I've never had one constituent come and see me or tweet me or anything saying we need to change the name of the Brecon Beacons.
No.
Not one person.
Look, forgive me, people might end up shouting at their TV screens now going, oh, he's getting angry about Hills again. But is this bigger than the Hills, right? Is this bigger than the Brecon Beacons? Because is this not just another example of us changing a well-established part of our society, our history, culture, some would say, in order to appease a group of people who weren't really asking us to appease them anyway? I don't know. I don't think Extinction Rebellion were at the top of the Brecon Beacon saying, you need to stop burning that wood.
No, I think it is a shame that they're changing the name, but it is the Welsh original name for it, and let's put that on the record. It's not a big name change, it's a total rebrand of the Brecon Beacons. It wasn't called for, it wasn't asked for any constituencies. Yeah, again, like you're saying, this is being changed to suit a narrative being pushed online and by a very small vocal minority of people.
But just in case people are turned off from visiting this thing because they can't remember that this used to be called the Brecon Beacons and it's now called...
I've got it on top of my head now. I can't even remember. Banai Brycheiniog.
Right, why should they visit that area? Quickly, come on, sell it.
They should visit the Brecon Beacons. I think it's the most beautiful part of the world. There's no better place for it. It's got amazing restaurants, amazing scenery, amazing people. Come and visit. You can change the name, but you can't change how beautiful that part of the world is. Come and visit. We're always welcome and open for business.
What a sell that is. Thank you very, very much. Good stuff. OK, that's James Evans, who's the member of the Senate for Brecon and Radnorshire. So there we go. Right, now, to the latest on Nicola Sturgeon, and Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf is coming under increasing pressure to suspend the former party leader. So it follows a video leaked by the Sunday Mail newspaper in which Sturgeon apparently tried to play down the party's financial problems when speaking to its NEC. She claims that the party had never been in a stronger financial position and to be careful about suggestions that there were problems. It was reportedly filmed in 2021, so just days before the police started to investigate the SNP finances. That led to the arrest of Sturgeon's husband, the former SNP chief executive Peter Murrell. He was released without charge pending further investigation. And let's be honest with you, it's all got a little bit fruity north of the border, hasn't it? This motorhome business taking place, now calls for Sturgeon to step down as a SNP member, as well as, of course, an MSP, which is easy to get those two things mixed up. Let's speak now to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, who I believe is outside Sturgeon's gaff. Tony, what's the latest?
So you would be forgiven for really thinking that, Scotland was already a series of battleground constituencies, the way that this week has kicked off. Humza Yousaf was up talking to the Scottish Trade Union Congress in Dundee, and while the cat was away, Anas Sarwar set up a press event in Humza Yousaf's own constituency of Pollock, where he said enough was enough, and it's time that we have an election. Now, Anas Sarwar and Scottish Labour have been itching for a snap election for quite some time now. Certainly enough that he, even last week, basically unveiled his entire shadow cabinet and called it election ready to the voters of Scotland. We're seeing Rutherglen and Hamilton, where, of course, Margaret Ferrier, after she did her long journey on the train with COVID, knowingly, it looks more and more likely that is going to be a by-election there. And, of course, the real question is Nicola Sturgeon. If she steps down for an MSP, then Glasgow South looks like it could be another by-election. It's really kind of all coming to a head now, though I seem to recall saying that a couple of weeks ago. And it's certainly the length of your intro there, Patrick, really shows kind of how fast this story is moving, how complex it is, and how many players have a say. Now, a lot of people are wondering is Nicola Sturgeon going to step down as an MSP? But certainly that is really only kind of half the discussion. What is to happen to her MSP members, her SNP membership? Well, I spoke to a former MSP, Stuart Caldwell, and I really asked him about Nicola Sturgeon's legacy and really the state of the SNP. What is the way out for them just now? Let's have a listen.
That's right. I mean, if you look at or try to sort of list Nicola Sturgeon's achievements in government, they are few and far between. I think on a personal level, she was a highly successful politician, but in terms of what her party was attempting to deliver under her leadership. It's been a failure. The SNP is no further forward than it was at the tail end of the 2014 independence referendum, certainly in terms of delivering independence to Scotland. And my personal view is that independence for Scotland is now off the table for the next 10 to 20 years. So I think there needs to be a clean start, a clean break and a new start. And the way that Humza Yousaf, if he doesn't indeed stay in position in power as First Minister, he has to distance himself from what has gone before and set up his own agenda and show that he's his own man with his own thoughts and ideas.
So there you go. It very much sounds like the continuity candidate was the wrong wagon for Humza Yousaf to hitch his campaign to. But certainly a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks, and you better believe that I'll be here to report any more events as they unfold here in Scotland.
Tony, thank you very much. Tony Maguire there, who is our man in Scotland, just covering all things SNP for us at the moment. OK, so there we go. Now, here's a little reminder for you. So Rishi Sunak wants us to get involved with maths. He wants more people doing more maths, OK? I was terrible at maths. Here is a reminder, I still am, of the question that I asked you a little earlier on, OK? So this is the question that I want an answer to. If 1 equals 3, 2 equals 3, 3 equals 5, 4 equals 4 and 5 equals 4... then what does 6 equal? OK, it's on your screens now if you're watching us on telly or if you're listening on radio. If 1 equals 3, 2 equals 3, 3 equals 5, 4 equals 4 and 5 equals 4, then what does 6 equal? I'll bring you the answer in the next hour, as well as name the boffins who got an answer to an earlier question right as well about interest rates, so well done you. Right, OK, loads more coming your way in the next hour, in the next few minutes, actually, I should say. There's good news for opponents of smart motorways. The government says no more of them will be built, so that's a big win. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, are communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
OK, welcome back. Now, animal rights protesters delayed the start of the Grand National on Saturday, and they've been accused of contributing to the fact that there were 3 deaths more than usual at this year's meeting. So police officers arrested 118 people after scores of activists climbed fences. At least 2 fixed themselves to a jump using glue and lock-on devices, according to Animal Rising. Now, Hill 16 died after falling at the first fence, and his trainer, Sandy Thompson, said the later start was partly to blame. Joining me now is Alex Lockwood, who's a spokesperson for Animal Rising, and Brendan Powell, who's a racing trainer and who won the Grand National when he was a jockey. Great stuff, both of you. Thank you very, very much. Right, look, I'll start with you, Brendan. Why not? Look, do you think that Animal Rising was to blame for the horses' deaths, or is it the fact that they were being raced, really?
No, I'm not going to blame Animal Rising for the death of the horse. And I mean, who knows? Basically, I was there, and the start was delayed for a good 11 minutes. And I think what's happened, especially the likes of Hill 16 and Sandy Thompson correctly said that his horse got upset. But usually there's a parade before the race. The horses are taken down slowly. They're walked around the start. They're kept as calm as possible, but because of the delay, which was caused by Animal Rising, the horses had to go down to the start, leave the paddock quickly, get down to the start quickly, and actually the start was very, very quick. Okay. And I just think the horses, rather than go down there and be relaxed, they were quite. A few of them would get quite upset.
Well, look, I can absolutely buy that you know, horses' routine was maybe ruined a little bit, and that may have contributed to the idea that they've, missed a jump, hit a fence, and whatever has unfortunately happened after that. But Alex, I'll bring you into it now. Alex Lockwood, who is the spokesperson for Animal Rising. How do you respond to that? At least one trainer has come out and basically literally blamed you guys for the deaths of the horses.
Yeah. We completely disagree with that, obviously. We weren't there in 2019, went up for review, fell and died at the first fence, breaking the neck. We weren't there when Dark Raven died at the 3 o'clock race on that day, and we weren't there when Envoy Special died on the first day of entry, and nor have we been present for the other 47 deaths this year on the tracks. We were there to stop the harm, and the reason why the harm happened, and the reason why Hill 16 died, was because they ran the race. And the reason why they ran the race was because millions of pounds were bet on it, because it's a national institution, and they did not want to see it stopped. And what we would actually say is, if we know the jockeys and trainers have great relationships with their horses. If they knew the horse was spooked, I know Hill 16 had surgery quite recently, then they needed to pull that horse from the race. OK, well, look, how do you respond to that, Brendan? The only reason, essentially, horse racing is cruel. And the only reason that we continue with this practice is because people bet loads of money on it and people stand to make loads of money on it.
Look, it's a massive industry, and it's been going on for centuries now. I mean, there's 20,000 horses race every single year. They're looked after with the best care and attention by over 6,000 staff. Anybody can go to the yard. They've got a national racehorse week in September, and I suggest Alex and the likes of them go down and see how these horses are looked after. There's over 60,000 thoroughbreds in Britain alone. We stop racing, what do we do with those?
OK, well, this is actually the perfect next question, really, I think. And I'll bring you in, Alex. I mean, these horses wouldn't exist if it wasn't for racing. So would you be happy for there to be fewer animals in the world as a result of this? You must be able to understand why some people would say that's slightly self-defeating for Animal Rising.
Yeah, for us, it's not a numbers issue, it's a moral issue. We would rather we do not want to breed and force animals into a life of suffering in this country What we want is actually to free up the wild, free up nature, let nature recover.
Just on that, because I think that's a really interesting point. Now, some human beings' lives are incredibly difficult and terrible, actually, to a large extent, OK? But there's always the glimmer of hope as long as you're right. There are things that we enjoy. So somebody who works in a job that they hate for no money, really, lives in poverty, has a terrible domestic relationship, still might enjoy Christmas or have the odd holiday that they enjoy. Something. You take my point here. And by your logic, would their lives not be worth living because the majority of it is a bit miserable?
Their lives are worth living, of course, and the horses' lives are worth living, all of those who currently are alive. The races are not the only problem. I mean, you know, we have worked with vets. We have done our research on this. Of course we have. We know that 80% of race horses in training have stomach ulcers because it's incredibly stressful. We know that horses do not want to be kept for 22 hours a day on their own in a stable. They're pack animals. They want to run together. So a fifth of all animals, or all horses, exhibit pathology such as weaving. Do you know, that it's not a good life. What we're asking for is exactly what we're saying. We believe we're the animal's glimmer of hope because what we want is industries where relationships with animals where we can love them but not harm them.
OK, Brendan, I'll just give the final word to you very quickly, Brendan, on this. Then, look, do you think that horse racing is at its day, actually, in the modern world?
No, absolutely not. I think it's a great industry. It's run by the Jockey Club and British Racing, who do a great job, and the horses are well looked after. And as I said, I invite Alex to go to a stable one day because he obviously has never been before, and there's plenty of trainers will actually let him go in.
Have you been to a stable before?
Yes.
OK, and would you be willing to go again?
Of course. This is all about having a national conversation and a dialogue where we can find solutions together.
OK, and just quickly, when's the next protest?
We will be holding a summer of campaign actions.
And I believe the jump season is finishing soon, so you're still going to campaign against the flat?
We're campaigning against a whole number of sort of sporting events.
A whole number of sporting events? Go on.
It's going to be big this summer. We're making a real statement for animals this year, and we're trying to build a mass movement to change our relationship with animals.
OK, and I presume you're going to involve things like greyhounds and stuff, are you?
We're going to organise a whole campaign of events this summer.
OK, all right. I wish I had more time with you. OK, all right, look, thank you very much, both of you. Alex Lockwood there is the spokesperson for Animal Rising, and Brendan Powell, who's a racing trainer, who won the Grand National when he was a jockey. Look, what do you make of that, ladies and gents? I've got a feeling... people are going to shout at me for this now. I've just got a feeling there are going to be changes to horse racing coming our way. Now, earlier on in the show, I set you a maths challenge by asking you this question. Hannah deposits £800 into a bank, which pays 4.5% simple interest a year. Work out what interest the bank pays over 3 years. And the answer is £108. So you convert the percentage into a decimal and multiply that by 800, which gives you the interest for 1 year. Then multiply that, apparently, by 3. Now, loads of you got in touch. Loads of you got it right. William in Belfast got it right. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I hate to call you out, but Mark in Folkestone, you know where you are, and you were absolutely way off, mate. So have a bit of that. You are just like me. Anyway, we're going to be setting you maths questions throughout the course of this show because Rishi Sunak thinks that we need to do more to promote maths. And I, frankly, have always been rather thick when it comes to maths, so my producers thought it'd be a good idea to stitch me up and make me look like a mug on national television, which I do every day anyway. Rishi Sunak is, however, also being investigated by the Parliamentary Standards Watchdog, and I will tell you whether or not this is going to be curtains for Rishi. Patrick Christys, GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day.
I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here with you all the way through until 6 p.m. I have, as ever, got a big hour coming your way. Get a load of this, ladies and gentlemen. So Rishi Sunak could well be in hot water. The parliamentary watchdog has launched an inquiry into him. I'll tell you what all that is about and how serious it may or may not be very shortly. And why aren't we having enough babies? That's right, apparently our birth rate is far too low. We are not doing our bit to replenish the human race. I went out and about to a very, very famous royal maternity wing earlier on to see what people thought.
It's just because compared to before, women are more career-oriented, they want to develop themselves professionally, marry later, and to be fair, kids go in the way of work.
Well, there you go. That's one theory anyway. But yes, we have now got the latest figures of the people that have crossed the channel so far this year. It's topped 5,000. Are we shaping up for yet another record year, supposedly double the amount that we had last year? And finally, as well, get a load of this, OK? Not our king. So protesters, Republican protesters, want more press, basically, want more media, which we are now giving them. I am aware of this. But they want the BBC to be more impartial, so give them more airtime at the coronation. What do you make of that? I appreciate the irony of the fact that I am now talking about it. Patrick Christys right here on GB News. Yes, OK. Now, also, Rishi Sunak is desperate for us all to be better at maths. And maths was my undeniable weak point at school. That and English, history, geography. Wasn't very good at PE. Anyway, right, so I have set you all a maths problem, which I have had to, because I can't remember it, write on a scrap of paper and read to you now. Hopefully it's coming up on your screens. And I want you've got until the end of the show to answer this, OK? So if 1 equals 3, 2 equals 3, 3 equals 5, 4 equals 4, and 5 equals 4, then what does 6 equal? I want you to get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me that answer before the end of this show. Right now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 4. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The launch of Elon Musk's Starship, the world's most powerful rocket, has been postponed. It was due to take off from SpaceX's Starbase facility in Texas earlier, but was called off at the last minute because of a technical issue of a frozen pressure valve. The team continue with a dress rehearsal instead, and Musk says they will retry in a few days' time. He'd played down the chances of success, admitting earlier anything that doesn't result in the destruction of the launch pad would be a win. The Prime Minister is under investigation by Parliament's ethics watchdog over a possible failure to declare an interest. Downing Street says the inquiry is over claims he failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major measure announced in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says the PM will clarify how it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Meanwhile, Mr Sunak has accepted the UK doesn't have enough teachers to deliver on his ambition to improve children's numeracy skills. He says an anti-maths mindset is costing the UK economy tens of billions of pounds every year and wants to ensure the subject is studied by all students in England up to the age of 18.
The UK is one of the least numerate countries in the developed world. More than 8 million adults have numeracy skills below those expected of a 9-year-old. And around a third of our young people don't pass maths GCSE. We make jokes about not being able to do maths. It's socially acceptable. We say things like, oh, maths, I can't do that, it's not for me, and everyone laughs. But we'd never make a joke like that about not being able to read.
Hillary Clinton has urged politicians in Northern Ireland to return to power sharing, saying the Windsor framework provides a path forward. She was speaking at the opening of a 3-day conference at Queen's University in Belfast to mark the 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement. Ms Clinton praised the deal as a true triumph of diplomacy, but says peace and prosperity are incomplete without a functioning power sharing government in Stormont.
You know we are at a standstill with the Northern Ireland Assembly no longer functioning. But the Windsor Agreement provides a path forward, not just for convening, but for positioning Northern Ireland as an economic hub for global trade and investment through privileged access to the UK and all of its trading partners.
More than 5,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year. GB News can reveal around 120 people have arrived today, with 3 small boats intercepted by UK authorities. It's after a surge in small boat crossings as criminal people smuggling gangs take advantage of better weather conditions. And a British-Russian critic of the Kremlin has been sentenced to 25 years in jail in Russia for speaking out about the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Kara-Murza has been found guilty of treason after spreading false information about the Russian army. He denies the allegations made against him. It's one of the harshest sentences of its kind since the Russian invasion. And a French court has cleared European plane maker Airbus and Air France of involuntary manslaughter nearly 14 years after a plane travelling from Brazil to France crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The trial was France's first ever for corporate manslaughter, with both firms pleading not guilty. It found several acts of negligence by both companies, but that wasn't enough for full liability for the crash. 228 people lost their lives on the flight travelling from Rio to Paris in June 2009. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, lots to go through, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Christys here on GB News. So let's get cracking, shall we? We start with Rishi Sunak, who is being investigated by Parliament Standards Watchdog. The Prime Minister is facing allegations of a possible failure to declare the shares his wife holds in a childcare agency that was boosted by the budget, OK? Let's speak now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's at Westminster. Darren, what is the allegation here, then, that Rishi Sunak put something in the budget that made his wife a load of money?
Well, no, that's not the allegation. Let's be honest about that, Patrick, and frank and open about that. Because, first of all, it must be said that the budget and its provision of extra childcare, well, that hasn't really been implemented yet and will take 2 years to do so. There is a concern, I think, among some MPs that potentially his wife could benefit, he could benefit because she's got shares in a company that does provide childcare. However, the main concern is whether the Prime Minister has been what's called frank and open about that kind of shareholding, if you like, in that particular business. We heard from the kind of commissioner investigating all of this a little earlier on, who's going to open this inquiry, saying that their main concerns around this idea about whether they were open and frank, were that members must declare any relevant information in any proceedings to the House of Commons or its committees and any communications with ministers, members, public officials or public holders of office, i.e., the short and sweet of it is that if there's a conflict of interest, you have to be very, very clear about that. Now, Downing Street are batting this away. They say that this has been declared, it has and is in kind of complies with the ministerial code, if you like, and that in the end, while they welcome the investigation and they will incorporate it, they are expecting Rishi Sunak to be exonerated by it. That is not stopped, though, the opposition clearly launching some attacks this afternoon. We've heard from Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, saying that this is leading to a black hole of transparency, which enables the Prime Minister and those he's appointed to dodge proper scrutiny of the affairs. The Lib Dems saying it looks like the Prime Minister allegedly bent the rules. In the end, we're not really going to know the details of all of this until the investigation is concluded, but it's much more around whether the Prime Minister's been transparent rather than at this stage if he's profited in any way at all. So we'll have to see how it plays out. It's not ideal timing, it must be said, though, for the Prime Minister at a time in which he's tried to distance himself as much as he can from the sleaze of previous Conservative Prime Ministers, if you like, and all this in the midst of a local election campaign, with those elections in just a matter of weeks' time.
All right, Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor in Westminster. Now, on to another story. We are not having enough babies, apparently, and there are fears that the UK economy is going to suffer serious damage because of our declining birth rate. It's down by 12% in the last 10 years. Viewers on GB News can now see that the number of births has fallen down the years. The Office for National Statistics monitors the total fertility rate, which shows the average number of children each woman has. Back in 1964, it peaked at 2.93 in England and Wales. So in 1964, your average woman was having 2.93 children in England and Wales. But in 2020, that was as low as 1.58, before rising slightly to 1.61 in 2021. You know, I really thought that we'd have had a big boom because it was lockdown, everyone was together. But anyway, maybe everyone just grew to hate each other instead. Olivia Rutley has this report.
On a sunny Saturday morning 50 years ago, this Oxford High Street would have been chock-a-block with harassed young mothers and their broods of unruly children. Today, you can count the number of prams on one hand. UK-wide, the birth rate has fallen by an eye-watering 12% over the past decade alone. And in places like Oxford, a city where house prices are sky-high, that figure is closer to 30%. As leading demographer Dr. Paul Morland explained to me, this astonishingly rapid decline is already affecting the economy.
It will have a huge impact, and it's already having a huge impact. So we already see an ageing population, and that's because lots of people are living longer, but there are fewer young people coming up behind them. When I started in the workplace, there were about 2 new entrants in their early 20s for every person leaving in their mid-60s, say. And now it's sort of 1 for 1. And our economy has a voracious appetite for labour. So back in the 80s, we had an unemployment problem. Today, in sector after sector, it's really hard to find new recruits despite mass immigration. And that's because we were simply having too few children 20, 30 years ago. So that's the impact on the economy and the labour market.
And the shrinking pool of infants is taking its toll on local communities too. Richard Tilley runs a marketing agency which is helping schools fill places in areas where the number of children has collapsed. I spoke to him about what's been going on in Oxford.
You have 8 standard-sized primary schools that are completely full in year 6 at the moment, the cohort that's going to go up to secondary school in September, and those schools will be completely empty in reception this September. There are only about 35, 36 primary schools in Oxford or on the edge of Oxford. So that pain is going to be shared around, but it's not as if there are hundreds and hundreds of schools and you're going to be able to easily absorb that problem. Schools in Oxford will have to shut. Schools everywhere are going to have to shut.
In the spring budget, Jeremy Hunt pledged £5 billion to dramatically improve the free childcare provision for working parents. In time, that should help make having children an easier decision for young couples. And there are other economic levers the Chancellor could pull too. In Hungary, for example, families with 3 children or more pay virtually no tax at all. But Dr. Paul Morland doesn't believe that money is a silver bullet.
I think the culture needs to change. I think there's a lot in the culture that is pointing away from fertility, and I think that is really what will make a difference. It's certainly the case that people with a more pronatal attitude, very often people with religious backgrounds, people who value children, are likely to have more children, and I think it's the cultural conversation that needs to shift.
Britain's baby bust is a problem for which there is no quick fix. But it's becoming increasingly clear that to prevent a crippling workforce shortage in the near future, the UK needs radical ideas and a long-term plan. Olivia Utley, GB News.
OK, so obviously that was Olivia Utley in Oxford there, trying to find out a bit more about our declining birth rate. Later on in the show, I'll play you a clip of when I went just over the road, actually, to the world-famous maternity ward, the Lindo Wing, where a procession of royal babies have been welcomed to the world, to find out people's rather fascinating theories as to why we're not getting busy enough. But Molly Kingsley, founder of Us For Them, a charity who stands up for children's interests, joins me now. Molly, great to have you on the show. Thank you. Why aren't we having enough babies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's multifactorial, isn't it? So, I mean, cost is the obvious one. So it costs on average 200 grand to raise a child to 18. That's obviously a huge amount of money at the best of times, and these are far from that. And then I think, as, you know, Paul Morland was saying just on Olivia's show then, you know, there's a load of cultural factors that really work against families, and I think in particular mothers wanting to have kids. So, you know, I think many women now want a career and they see that as really important. I think the parental leave system probably hasn't caught up with that. So in theory, we have shared parental leave, but the reality is that, you know, for many families, it isn't shared. It still falls largely to women. And I think many women have looked at that and thought, wow, this looks like a lot of hard work. It's going to come at a time that's, you know, often key in their careers, and they shy away from it. And I think the other huge cultural thing is we don't treat our children very well as a cohort. And obviously we saw that, you know, really profoundly during the pandemic. And I think, you know, I feel very lucky that I had my kids before the pandemic, because undoubtedly having kids is the best thing I've ever done. But actually, had I not, I think I would have felt rather differently about it.
When you say we don't treat our kids well, now, yeah, there were some absolutely catastrophic examples of terrible child abuse that took place during the pandemic. Do you mean we don't treat them well in terms of what, like the lockdowns from schools and stuff? I mean, is there are we a nation of bad parents?
Yeah, no, I don't mean that. And I'm not really talking about the very extreme cases of abuse. And even lockdown, actually, although obviously that was terrible for kids. But I think really what we saw during the pandemic is that our society looks after its older people and its adults better than its children. You know, it's a gerontocracy, and it's a political gerontocracy, actually, because the way, obviously, our voting works is that children don't get a vote. So, you know, children's interests are not well represented in politics. And I think we saw that really, really starkly during the pandemic, but you don't have to look to those 2 years to see that. So, you know, to give you a recent example of the kind of thing I'm talking about, if you look at NHS waiting lists, now obviously NHS waiting lists are bad across the board, but over the last 6 months, they have grown further for children than they have for adults. And in fact, if you look, say, at community care, the waiting list for adults from the period, I think it was October to January, actually fell. For children across the country, it rose. So there's this chronic underinvestment in children and children's services.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to get one more in with you before we run out of time, if that's all right. And I just wonder whether or not people don't feel a sense of duty to have children, because there is an argument that unless we are replenishing our own stock and possibly going even one further per couple, then we aren't really doing our duty for humanity or the future economy. And should our priorities really be home ownership and spending money on nice rooftop cocktails in central London or things like that? Should it not just be primarily about breeding?
as a species, that's why we exist, isn't it? And I think it's a really sad state of affairs when actually many of us are turning off that. But I think, you have to make it attractive for people to do that, affordable and attractive. And as a society, our culture needs to shift, and it needs to shift really quite radically, I think.
All right, look, Molly, thank you very, very much. Great stuff. That always great to chat to you. It's Molly Kingsley there, founder of Us For Them, a charity that stands up for children's interests. I've got to be honest with you, I think the way that we date each other now with these apps and everything, I think that's having a massive impact, because I think people always feel as though they can do better. You're just a swipe away from your perfect match, which, let's be honest with you, never really comes about through one of those apps. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you met your partner on an app, I don't know, but I just think there's this perception that there's more perfection out there than possibly there is, and people are less willing to give things a go. Let me know what you think about this. But coming up, on our Prime Minister's ambition to get Brits to get better at maths. Now, earlier on in the programme, I set you this challenge. If 1 equals 3, 2 equals 3, 3 equals 5, 4 equals 4, and 5 equals 4, then what does 6 equal? The answer is coming up. And also, I asked you another question earlier on, and loads of you have been getting in touch to tell me that we got the answer wrong, OK? We didn't get it wrong, and I've got a maths teacher on to tell you why very shortly. All of this absolute, utter maths bedlam epitomises exactly why, maybe, we need to get better at maths. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's very chaotic news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now to the migrant crisis, and we've hit a landmark today. GB News can reveal that more than 5,000 people have now crossed the channel on small boats so far this year. Viewers will be able to see some of the migrants who arrived at Dover this morning. So these are fresh images of the scene at Dover this very morning. And around 120 people have crossed the Channel today. Official Home Office figures show that 37 people arrived on one boat yesterday. Last year, a record number of 45,756 migrants crossed the Channel, but sources have told GB News that Home Office officials are planning for the possibility of up to double that number arriving this year. So those were live images, or images earlier today, I should say, of people crossing the Channel just arriving in Dover. Rishi Sunak's big pledge to stop the boats, which eagle-eyed and eagle-eared viewers will note that on Friday he rowed back on a little bit, saying he'll do all he can to stop the boats, is looking pretty bleak, isn't it? Rwanda clearly is not a deterrent. Mainly, I would colour me staggered here, possibly because we haven't actually sent a single person there and there is no sign of us sending a single person there. It's not acting as a deterrent, is it? And maybe we could have even double the amount that we had last year, which would take it up to around 90,000. That news today, we have welcomed our 5,000th Channel migrant into Britain already this year. Moving on, the Labour Party has pledged to train 1,500 doctors a year to tackle the backlog of patient appointments in the NHS, promising to double medical school places if elected. Now, Labour said the expansion will be paid for by abolishing the non-dom tax status on wealthy earners. It is worth me at this point saying that, as far as I can tell, based on the Labour MPs and shadow ministers that I have interviewed on this programme, they want the non-dom tax status to pay for the NHS, massive parts of the education system and huge energy subsidies. So the non-dom tax status here, which equates to around £3 billion a year, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here when it comes to Labour's plan to pay for everything, but thought I'd make that clear. Meanwhile, the RCN General Secretary has said that the nursing strikes could continue up till Christmas unless the government returns with a credible pay offer after rejecting the last offering on Friday. Responding to an urgent question on the strikes earlier today, Health Secretary Steve Barclay said it was regrettable that the BMA Junior Doctors Committee chose the period immediately after Easter to cause maximum disruption, extending their strike to 96 hours and asking their members not to inform hospitals whether they intended to go on strike, which made contingency planning more difficult. And when we look at what happened with the Royal College of Nursing, Unison that day, that very day, voted in favour of accepting a pay deal, 5% plus a financial compensation offer, cash deal in a way, from the year before. So they voted in favour of that. That included ambulance drivers, paramedics, etc. 54% of a 61% turnout for the Royal College of Nursing voted in favour of more strike action. So they are in very much a minority when you look at the nursing body as a whole, OK? They are saying there's more strike action. They're going to coordinate that with junior doctors. With me now is Dr Lawrence Gurlis, who is a GP at Same Day Doctor. Look, Labour is saying they're going to invest more in getting more GPs. The Tories are saying we're going to give you a bit more money. That's where we are now. Isn't all of this just sticking plaster politics stuff? And what we need is a radical reformation of our health system. And is the answer staring us in the face? Australia.
Well, yes, we need a radical reform. I can't see it happening, to be quite honest, Patrick, because there's so much opposition to any change within the health service. It can't be done without the consent of the profession itself, with the nursing, the doctors, and they're against any change. All they're asking for is more money. They're totally resistant to any idea. You know, there are doctors on social media saying, oh, no, we don't want a fee-paying system in the UK. But by the way, I'm off to Australia to work because they pay better, without actually acknowledging the fact that Australia has a social insurance system and people pay to see their doctor. So I don't understand the objection to a fee-paying system in the UK when those same people are more than happy to threaten to go and work in Australia or other countries where patients pay for their medical care.
But
so,
Dr
yes,
Lawrence, why would they be so against implementing an Australian-style system? Because as far as I can tell, the Australian-style system means much higher wages for those who work in the health service, much better quality of patient care as well, and a bit less money for the taxpayer.
What people say to me, what the doctors say to me, is it will just increase inequality. It's pure ideology. People don't want to take responsibility for making a radical change. They want other people to take responsibility, and then they're more than happy to sit back and reap the benefit of it. And look, I'm not a political person, but the idea of training 1,500 doctors a year, I welcome that. But when will those doctors actually be ready? In
6
about
years.
12 years' time, Patrick. No, more than that. More than that. GPs, 5 years medical school, 2 years foundation, 3 years GP training. You know, the
Right.
BMA voted against the expansion of medical schools in 2008. Those doctors will now be working. And, you know, there's nothing more than a union likes than there being a shortage of doctors. It strengthens their
Can you explain,
negotiating.
could some people slip through the gaps? So if we went to more of a fee-paying system, OK, could there be some people who slip through the gaps? Would it be as straightforward as, if you are poor, you don't get healthcare? Or would it just be that people who can afford it... So let's say if I wanted a GP's appointment, right, I would have to pay for that GP's appointment because, thankfully, I'm in a situation where I probably can, right? So I would pay for that, but let's say my neighbour who's on a lot less money would not pay for it, but they would still get it for free. Is that how it would work? Because then who's missing out under that system?
It's quite workable. No one has to suffer. We can have safety nets. We can have protection for people that can't afford it. Listen, there are a lot of clever people around. It's not as simple as saying we want an American-style system or everyone's got to pay. Of course, people like you, people like me, should pay to see a doctor. And you have a social insurance system, possibly through your work, in the same way as we had auto-enrolment for pensions. We'll have auto-enrolment for healthcare. So you have an insurance system through your work and a safety net. The problem is the ideologists will object to that. The first thing they say is, oh, it's a two-tier system. You know, one for the rich, one for the poor. Well, the reality is, Patrick, we've got that
We
at the
already
moment
have it.
anyway.
We
We've got
already
a
have it.
two-tier system, but no one wants to acknowledge it.
Dr. Lawrence, it's an uncomfortable thing to say. It's an uncomfortable thing to say. I actually did say it over the weekend, and there is a clip of this doing the rounds, and I evidenced this with a variety of different stats. I'm going to ask you, because maybe you think this is bang out of order. You work in the medical profession. You know better than I do. Do you think that, unfortunately, the reality is that junior doctors just want more money and they are happy for people to die in hospitals in order for them to get that?
I think junior doctors deserve more money. Let me make that absolutely clear. But I don't agree with them striking, and the strikers cause great harm to patients and possibly death. So in that sense, I agree with you, Patrick. Having said that, they deserve more money. Junior doctors are horribly underpaid. Their conditions of work are terrible. The 4-day strike just after Easter, then into a 2-day weekend, and more strikes to come. I don't support the strikes. They do a great deal of harm to patients. Yes, I agree with that side of what.
Dr. Lawrence, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure. Dr. Lawrence Gurlis there, a GP at Same Day Doctor. Yeah, I just think it's time for radical reform, is it not? The current system at the moment isn't benefiting those who work for it, clearly. And clearly they do want and need, and I think in many, many cases deserve more money. It's certainly not sorting the patients out, is it? Everyone, I think, quite terrified of getting ill at the moment in this country, are we not? So is it not time to have a serious conversation about reforming it? And if people who are complaining about working in the NHS all the time are dead against us doing anything to radically change it, what's all that about? Anyway, there's loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. The Brecon Beacons is one of the most beautiful parts of the UK, but I will tell you why it's got a new name, and wish me luck when I try to pronounce it. And the BBC has been accused of lacking impartiality in its royal coverage. And the reason may shock you, actually. The reason may shock you. But first, here's the latest headlines of Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. It's 4:30. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak is under investigation by Parliament's ethics watchdog over a possible failure to declare an interest. Downing Street says the inquiries over claims he failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major measure announced in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to get more people to become childminders. Downing Street said the Prime Minister will clarify how it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. SpaceX has called off the launch of the world's most powerful rocket, Starship. It was due to take off this afternoon for the first time, but in the last few moments, the pressure valve became frozen. The team, which is in Texas, will continue a dress rehearsal instead. A minimum of 48 hours is needed before a second attempt of the launch. Earlier, Elon Musk said anything that doesn't result in the destruction of the launch pad would be a win.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says poor numeracy and an anti-maths mindset is costing the UK economy tens of billions of pounds every year. The Prime Minister is setting up a review to ensure maths is studied by all students in England up to the age of 18 without making it a compulsory A-level. He's also criticised the culture that it's OK to be bad at maths, claiming it leaves people twice as likely to be unemployed than those with competent skills. And a French court has cleared European plane maker Airbus and Air France of involuntary manslaughter, almost 14 years after a plane travelling from Brazil to France crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The trial was France's first ever for corporate manslaughter, with both firms pleading not guilty. It found several acts of negligence by both companies, but that wasn't enough for full liability for the crash. 228 people lost their lives on the flight travelling from Rio de Janeiro to Paris in June 2009. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Welcome back. So the news of the investigation into the Prime Minister has overshadowed his call for pupils to study maths right up until they leave school at 18. In a speech this morning, Rishi Sunak had his plans outlined, which he says basically wants to bring maths to life and make the subject a key skill every bit as essential as reading, which anyone who just watched the last 5 seconds there will know I do sometimes struggle with as well. But opposition parties say that he's guilty, here we go, of getting his sums wrong, and there aren't enough maths teachers to achieve his ambition. To be honest with you, what's happening here, ladies and gentlemen, right, is that I was always terrible at maths at school, really couldn't do it. I've got very much a mental block on this, and the idea of doing maths has frazzled me to the point when I actually can't even do this job anymore. I can now speak, though, with maths teacher and author and podcast host Bobby Seagull. Bobby, thank you very much for joining us. Why is maths so important? And why is it interesting? Because I've got to be honest with you, it makes me want to tear my eyes out.
So, Patrick, what I would say is that 1/3 of the countries, the students, they get a grade at GCSE that's 3 or below, that's deemed a fail. So that's about 200,000 children a year. They leave going into the world of work feeling as if they can't do maths. And the implication of this is when they look at their bank statement, even when they're cooking a meal or they're looking at a bus timetable, their mind goes, oh, I can't do maths, I can't do numbers. So it's not about getting young people to be able to do Pythagoras and trigonometry. I love those things, but I realize it doesn't float everyone's boat. But the key thing, Patrick, is we need to make sure as a nation we are much more numerate. And I've got a few qualms about the Prime Minister's initiative, but I do applaud the fact that we have a Prime Minister that really is trying to boost the, I guess, the value of numeracy in this country.
Now, look, Bobby, before we go any further, I have to clear something up because we were asking our viewers two maths questions today. One of them's been and gone. We answered it, OK? The other one's still coming up. Now, I'm going to read out this question, OK? Right? And the reason I'm reading it out again is because when we read out the answer, I got a flurry of messages telling me that we'd got the answer wrong. And so I'm going to write this to you. So, Hannah deposits £800 into a bank, which pays 4.5% simple interest a year. Work out what interest the bank pays over 3 years. One more time for the people at the back. Yeah. Hannah deposits £800 into a bank account, which pays 4.5% simple interest a year. Work out what interest the bank pays over 3 years. Now, we read out the answer as being £108, OK? And I have had a load of people get in touch to say that this isn't absolutely correct at all. Not sure if your sums are correct, says Bill. 4.5% of 800 is 36 quid. If you add that to 800, you now have £836 in your account. Second year interest, he goes on and on and on. I mean, this is just one of a number of... Brian thinks it's £112.93 and that I'm especially thick. What's going on, Bobby?
I think you might be right, because so the way to do this, break it down. Work out 1% of 800, so divided by 100, that's £8.
Yeah.
So that's 4 lots of that to give us 4%, £32, but it's 4.5. So half of 4 is 8 is 4, so £36 so far per year. Simple means you add that 3 times. So 36 times 3 is 30, 60, 90, 90 plus 18 is 108. £108.
Get in. Have that, Bill. Have that, Brian. Yeah, and the rest of you. Good
In your
stuff.
face,
Thank you
Bill and
very much,
Brian.
Bobby. Right, I mean, this is great. But look, OK, now that was slightly more interesting than my general math lessons. Do you think... So I struggle from a mental block when it comes to maths, which I think is immediately obvious to people. How do we get around this in schools? Because even Rishi Sunak just saying we need to do more maths, people think that is a vote loser, not a vote winner. How do we make maths sexy?
Yeah, do you want? This is the $1 million or $1 billion question to make maths more sexy. But I would say there's a couple of issues here. One is we should remove the stigma about being bad at maths, because people often are like, oh, I can't do maths. Actually, it's okay to say that you can't do maths, but the key is what do you want to do to get better at it? So can you take steps to improve? But the other thing that's really vital, Patrick, is to show young people where they see it in their daily lives. Again, I teach in a school. Lots of my students love football. They're checking league tables constantly. That is arithmetic skills. Or I've got some students that love cooking or baking. When they're putting it in the oven in like 15 minutes against particular heat temperature, that's maths and numeracy. If you just show, 2x plus 7x plus 3x divided by the cube root of 7, I'm just making up some nonsense stuff. But if you make it really abstract early on, people's eyes glaze over. The more you can show them it's relevant, the better.
But, I don't mind admitting this at all. And all joking aside, I was very, very, very embarrassed, actually, by my inability to do maths. And I used to work at a pub restaurant, and it was a decent few years ago now, and a lot more people were paying in change and not just tapping on their card. And they would buy a pint or something, and they'd give me an amount of money. And clearly, the answer for the amount of change that they were owed was immediately obvious to everybody. And it really wasn't for me. And I used to get really embarrassed about that. And I think that actually completely turned me off it. And so in my head now, I see numbers and I go, I can't do it. And I panic and I'm rubbish. And I try and do what I've been doing for the majority of this show, which is turn it into a bit of a joke. But actually, that doesn't really get me anywhere. The only problem that there could be with this, Bobby, though, this new plan from Rishi Sunak, is we might not have enough maths teachers to actually teach these additional classes. Is that true?
Yeah, that is an issue, because currently in secondary schools, 1 in 8 lessons, Patrick, are taught by non-math specialists. So imagine that 12.5%, that's 1 out of 8, hopefully, 12.5% of lessons are being taught by people that have maths not at university level. So I think the issue is that if you're a mathematician, like I spent 7 years working in the city in banking and finance, it is your lured towards the high-paying finance careers. So what can we do to make sure we attract them? But I think there's a bigger issue about retaining teachers. And Patrick, you and I have had many conversations over the past few months about why some teachers are choosing to go on strike about pay and working conditions. Actually, if you want to attract good teachers and keep them in the profession, you need to make sure that we do look after them fairly.
Good stuff. All right, Bobby, look, thank you very, very much. And is that a West Ham shirt in the background there?
I'm a Hammer, happy Hammer. We drew against Arsenal yesterday.
Have you done the maths on how likely they are to go down this season, mate?
It's probably, actually, I've seen it's about 3 to 4% chance.
Fair enough. All right, he's called me out there, hasn't he? Bobby, good lad. Cheers. Bobby Seagull there, who is a maths teacher. An all-round nice guy as well. Right, OK, so in case you are just tuning in and wondering whether or not this is a bang-average version of Countdown, no, it is in response to Rishi Sunak saying we all need to do more maths. So I've got another challenge for you, OK? We've done the one in the last hour. It proved deeply controversial because people are still emailing in to say that both me, the entire GB newsroom, and an actual maths teacher are wrong about the sum. But we're going to move on from that now. And we have got we have got another couple of questions, I believe, have we, to give to people? But there we go. Let's get to that challenge. My producer, Steve, has decided to give me, to show the world my mathematical genius. I tackled a couple of questions in the first part of the show. Here goes another couple, I believe, is it? Is that right? And this is the first one I gave you earlier, so you worked it out. If 1 equals 3, 2 equals 3, 3 equals 5, 4 equals 4, and 5 equals 4, then what is the answer? Now, initially, I thought it was 2, but the answer is 3. So follow the pattern. OK, 1 has 3 letters, 2 has 3 letters, 3 has 5 letters, and you get to 6, which, of course, has 3 letters. But forgive me, I got lost in all of this because that's not really a maths question, is it? It's words and letters. This is just confusing for me. But let's have one more, OK? Sally, well done, by the way, for everyone who got this right. Jan, you got that right. Charlie got it right. Brian got it right. In fact, most people apart from me got that right. Here's a fresh one. Sally is 54 years old and her mother is 80. So Sally is 54 years old and her mother is 80. How many years ago was Sally's mother 3 times her age? Right? Do I have to try and answer this now? Grief. 54, old, mother is 80. I'm not going to do it. If anyone's got it, well done. 41 years ago, when Sally was 13 and her mother was 39, because 39 divided by 13 is 3. I am going to need to have a rather long lie down after this, but there we go. There is some good news for opponents of smart motorways. The government says that no more of them will be built. It is a massive win for people who've been campaigning about all of this, because a lot of people, and rightly so in my opinion, think that they are an absolute death trap. I am Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Now this will get you going. The campaign group Republic has accused the BBC of a lack of impartiality in its coverage before the coronation of King Charles. They're accusing the broadcaster of failing to hold the monarchy to account. Earlier today, they tweeted up, Republic has written to the BBC in issuing a strong rebuke of their royal and coronation coverage. We met with our senior executives 12 years ago. At the time, the BBC said they would achieve balance over time. We're still waiting. Well, in response, the BBC have said, we believe our reporting is fair and duly impartial, and BBC News always seeks to reflect a range of viewpoints on our royal coverage. What they are essentially saying is that when you see these numpties with the not my king stuff and lobbing eggs at the king and saying we don't want the monarchy, or those quite disgusting people, I think, who decided that they were going to actually protest whilst people were queuing up to see our late Queen lying in state. You know, who does that, really? The BBC is not giving enough coverage to people who think that the monarchy should essentially be burnt to the ground for historical wrongs. I am joined now by former Labour MP, Dennis McShane. Dennis, do you hate the monarchy?
Good Lord, no. In broad terms, I divide countries in Europe. Those are monarchies, those are republics. Over my adult lifetime, those republics have had far more turmoil and difficulty, whereas Norway and Denmark and the Netherlands... And obviously, we're spoilt in this country because of the long, long reign of the Queen. I think there are a lot of questions the new king has to answer, and I don't think they'll be asked by the BBC, because we're divided now into fawners, fawning on our knees in front of them, or yawners, people just bored stiff with them.
Yeah, OK, so should the protesters be given... I appreciate the irony of this, by the way, because we are now talking about them. But should they be given more airtime? You know, do you think that it is right? Or actually, do they not do it? You know when a streaker runs onto a football pitch and the cameras pan away because it's deemed to be unsightly and a bit offensive? Is that the same thing with people who hold up a sign that says, "Not my king," a day of national celebration?
I was working very calmly at home on a complicated paper about Italian politics, Patrick, when your lovely, lovely producer phoned me up and said, "Come in." I said, "God, they're not taking this seriously, are they?" But it's a laugh, isn't it? I mean, you're enjoying it. Look, you're giggling. I can see.
Because I think, you know, there's no way to cover it without giving them coverage, which I suppose is what they want. But at the same time, I do find it quite offensive. I find it particularly offensive, Dennis, just in the immediate aftermath of our Queen's death, where people were queuing up literally for miles to go see it. And you've got numpties there going, you know, not my future king, down with the monarchy. You think, you know, good grief, what have you done for this country?
Let the people decide. I was struck by a Sunday Times story a couple of weeks ago, which said for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and I was there on the wall with others, I was commentating for French television, actually, there were 19,000 street parties organised. The Sunday Times said for the King's coronation, there are 247 registered.
Right.
So the people enjoy the day off, love the pageantry. We do it brilliantly, the marching bands and colourful uniforms and all the medieval stuff. I find all that business about anointing and so on a bit daft, but never mind. But at some stage, I think actually going forward, I mean, Charles is not a young man, well, nor am I, but it doesn't matter, I'm not the king. I think... sooner or later he'll be, a bit more sort of not able to run around as he can today. If he lives as long as his mum and dad, it means William inherits the throne when he's 65.
Yeah.
And then little George in his 60s. We're going to have this very old monarchy.
I suppose that's maybe the accumulated wisdom of a monarchy, isn't it, really? Just very quickly, Dennis, you don't think that every single media report that talks about the monarchy should have, in the interest of balance, which you know I'm all about, balance has to have something in the bottom of it, like some people disagree with the monarchy fundamentally, or they've got links to the slave trade, or they're an entitled bunch of poshers.
You mean like a packet of cigarettes in the old days?
Yeah.
Warning, tobacco may damage your health. Warning, the king may not be the best head of state. But, I mean, look, if you want to do that, yes, but I would like some deeper examination, because a lot of feudal structures that still control our country, dominate it, are for the worse, in my view. Not the king himself. So there should be a bit more of a debate. I think it'll happen anyway. I'd let the coronation happen. Let's have the day off.
Just let it happen. Yeah, these miserable sad acts who are going to go and try and ruin a day of national celebration. Dennis, thank you very much. You would never do such a thing. Dennis McShane there, former Labour MP. Right, now, though, to big news that will affect drivers right across the UK. The government has decided not to build any more smart motorways. Smart motorways do away with the hard shoulder. They've been blamed for the deaths of a number of people. 14 planned smart motorways are now being removed from the government's road building plans. 11 of them were already under construction. Joining me now is Dr Alan Billings, South Yorkshire Police's Crime Commissioner, South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner, easy for me to say. Welcome to the fray. OK, so is this a good thing that we are now banning more smart motorways?
I'm glad they're banning future motorways. It doesn't help us in South Yorkshire, where we've already got smart motorways of a particular kind, the kind where there is always, where the hard shoulder should be, it's always a live lane. So we're that type of motorway, all lanes running, they're called ALRs. It won't help us at all because we're stuck with them. We've still got them. OK, all right. And look, I suppose my question would be, instead of removing the hard shoulder, why don't we add an extra lane on the patch of grassy land that there always is next to an existing motorway? Well, at the end of the day, I think it'll all come to that because, I mean, our objection is that if you have simply all lanes running, literally all lanes running, and your car breaks down and you stop and you can't get to an emergency refuge, and this is the point, if you can't get to the emergency refuge, then you've got traffic coming up behind you in a live lane. You're in a live lane, you're stuck there. So, and what you can't do with the present situation in South Yorkshire is to get out of your vehicle onto a grassy bank or anywhere else, because they simply haven't got the room for that. So you're trapped in your vehicle. If you get out of it, you're going to be knocked down. If you stay in your vehicle, you're going to be hit as well. So we've had 3 inquests now in this area where each of the coroners in turn have said that a death would have been avoided if the people in those vehicles had been able to get onto a hard shoulder. Now, I don't think you can ignore that kind of verdict by an inquest and by a coroner's judgment.
No, exactly. And I've got to be honest with you, Dr. Allen, part of me really feels as though we were taken for an absolute ride here. I think most people at the start of the inception of smart motorways were looking at this and thought, so you're telling me that by, in large parts, removing the hard shoulder, it's in some way going to make traffic flow easier and also safer for people who break down. We were told that the technology would sort it out. Some of the cameras that they use to monitor the traffic missed up, so they have to point them at the sun so they can dry off, so they're not looking at the road. So the very thing that's supposed to make it safer on a smart motorway is not working quite a lot of the time. And
yes,
I feel quite offended by the idea of smart motorways, that we were being asked to buy into something. Well, we were absolutely fudged from the start, were we not?
I think you're right. I don't know whether taken for a ride is quite the metaphor, but I agree with you. We were totally misled. I think it was all done for the sake of saving a few pounds. It was all done about cheapness, so that if you added an existing lane and made that into an existing hard shoulder and made that into a live lane, then you were saving money. If you wanted to extend your number of carriageways, as in South Yorkshire, then you just didn't add a hard shoulder. You simply used up all the land to put your carriageways on. And we were told that was going to be safer. So we're being asked to believe this, that if our vehicle stops in a live lane, we're safer if we can't get out of that onto a hard shoulder than if we'd had a hard shoulder at the side of us. I just don't believe it. I think it's nonsense.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. And I think yet again, what we're witnessing here is governments not planning for the future. We're not planning our infrastructure around the reality that is before us. The amount of people that we have in this country, we invite into this country one way or another anyway, a city half the size of Birmingham. Our population growth in that sense is rapid, and our infrastructure right across the board in terms of schools, GPs, everything, and of course roads, is not hitting that target. Dr. Allen, thank you very much. Dr. Allen Billings there, South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner, who is a very, very grateful learner of the fact that now we are going to have no more smart motorways, not before time. I'm going to delve into the inbox, people, just to round off this hour. gbviews@gbnews.uk. A couple of big ones for you today. There is a huge amount of, I would go as far as to say, visceral anger in the inbox about a maths question that we asked you to answer before, because Rishi Sunak says that we should all be doing more maths. And I think this is why loads of you are saying that, look, this is we got the answer wrong. And it turns out that we didn't. I've had this confirmed by everyone in the office and indeed a maths teacher. So I hate to break it to you, you are wrong. But another big topic for us has been on the birth rates, and I'm leading the next hour with it because apparently we are not having enough babies, and this is going to lead to a shortage of people in terms of the human race, but also bad for our economy. We are having fewer children as more men and women remain single, says Stephen. Ray says it's very simple. People can't afford to live unless both partners work. So the idea there that women will be going to work and not maybe fulfilling the traditional role of staying at home. Why can't dads do it? I know. Lower the tax burden, they say. Samantha says, I wish you wouldn't bring this to people's attention. All that will happen is it will encourage people who shouldn't have kids to have them. Responsible parents breed the kids they can afford. Irresponsible parents just breed. That is from Samantha. Thank you very, very much for that, Samantha. The idea, of course, that people will now be watching me on the telly and decide that because of what I say, they now need to go and procreate, I think is quite a disturbing world, isn't it? But loads more on this when we come back. I am Patrick Christys, and this is GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Evening all, it's just gone 5 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys here on GB News, and we start with Rishi Sunak. He's in the news twice today. First, because there's an inquiry by the parliamentary watchdog into whether or not he may well have misled Parliament. Of course, he would deny all of this. And also, he wants us all to do maths more, so I'm going to inflict some maths on you today. In other news, Britain's baby bust. We are not having enough babies, OK? The birth rate is incredibly low, and that is going to be damaging for our economy and potentially humanity. I went out and about to find out why people aren't having kids.
It's just because, compared to before, women are more career-oriented. They want to develop themselves professionally, marry later, and to be fair, kids go in the way of work.
Now, I appreciate the irony of what I'm about to show to you, but should anti-royal protesters be given more airtime? Because Republic has accused the BBC of not being impartial enough in its coverage and basically, reading between the lines, being too pro-monarchy. What do you make of that? And finally, as well, another controversial topic, this: who killed the horses at the Grand National? Because the people who own the horses are accusing protesters who turned up of disrupting them, spooking them, and then unfortunately 3 died over the course of the weekend there. But of course, the protesters are saying, well, if you weren't riding the horses to begin with at the Grand National, then they wouldn't have died. Is the clock ticking on horse racing, do you think, in the modern world? All of that coming your way and much more with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. OK, a lot to get your teeth stuck into there. Why aren't people having enough kids? And do you think that people who dislike the monarchy should be allowed to protest and given airtime for their protests during the coronation? That's what I want. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The launch of Elon Musk's Starship, the world's most powerful rocket, has been postponed. It was due to take off from SpaceX's Starbase facility in Texas earlier, but was called off at the last minute because of a technical issue. The team continue with a dress rehearsal instead, and Musk says they'll retry in a few days' time. He'd played down the chances of success, admitting earlier on anything that doesn't result in the destruction of the launch pad would be a win. The Prime Minister is under investigation by Parliament's ethics watchdog over a possible failure to declare an interest. Downing Street says the inquiries over claims he failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major measure announced in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to recruit more childminders. Number 10 says the Prime Minister will clarify how it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Meanwhile, Mr Sunak has accepted the UK doesn't have enough teachers to deliver on his ambition to improve children's numeracy skills. He says an anti-maths mindset is costing the UK economy tens of billions of pounds every year and wants to ensure the subject is studied by all students in England up to the age of 18.
The UK is one of the least numerate countries in the developed world. More than 8 million adults have numeracy skills below those expected of a 9-year-old. And around a third of our young people don't pass maths GCSE. We make jokes about not being able to do maths. It's socially acceptable. We say things like, oh, maths, I can't do that, it's not for me, and everyone laughs. But we'd never make a joke like that about not being able to read.
Hillary Clinton has urged politicians in Northern Ireland to return to power sharing, saying the Windsor framework provides a path forward. She was speaking at the opening of a 3-day conference at Queen's University in Belfast to mark the 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement. Ms Clinton praised the deal as a true triumph of diplomacy, but says peace and prosperity are incomplete without a functioning power-sharing government in Stormont.
You know we are at a standstill with the Northern Ireland Assembly no longer functioning. But the Windsor Agreement provides a path forward, not just for convening, but for positioning Northern Ireland as an economic hub for global trade and investment through privileged access to the UK and all of its trading partners.
More than 5,000 people have crossed the English Channel in small boats this year. GB News can exclusively reveal around 120 people have arrived today, with 3 small boats intercepted by UK authorities. It's after a surge in small boat crossings as criminal people smuggling gangs take advantage of better weather conditions. A British-Russian critic of the Kremlin has been sentenced to 25 years in jail in Russia for speaking out about the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Kara-Murza has been found guilty of treason after spreading false information about the Russian army. He denies the allegations made against him. It's one of the harshest sentences of its kind since the Russian invasion. A French court has cleared European plane maker Airbus and Air France of involuntary manslaughter almost 14 years after a plane travelling from Brazil to France crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The trial was France's first ever for corporate manslaughter, with both firms pleading not guilty. It found several acts of negligence by both companies, but that wasn't enough for full liability for the crash. 228 people lost their lives on the flight, travelling from Rio to Paris in June 2009. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, Patrick, it is back to you.
Welcome back. Loads to get through, so let's get cracking. And we start with the news that Rishi Sunak is being investigated by Parliament Standards Watchdog. The Prime Minister is facing allegations of a possible failure to declare the shares his wife holds in a childcare agency that was boosted by the budget. Let's speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is at Westminster for us. Darren, is this a storm in a teacup?
Well, I'm not entirely sure it is, though we're going to have to wait, really, frankly, Patrick, to find out whether it is or not. It's clearly not a good look for any Prime Minister to be investigated by the Standards Commissioner. Essentially, the Standards Commissioner's job is to ensure that things are declared properly or not, that there's no conflict of interest, that an MP, a minister, the Prime Minister is not necessarily benefiting from links in Parliament that aren't properly declared. And that's the nub of this issue. It's not whether at the moment he's somehow financially benefiting or not. It's whether he's been what's called frank and open about that declaration or not. Now, at the moment, clearly some MPs feel that's not been the case. He was questioned, the Prime Minister, about this at the Liaison Committee. That's a meeting with senior MPs before Easter. The Prime Minister then, at the time, said everything was above board. He also then sent a letter to that committee insisting that was the case, though today clearly the Standards Commissioner feels that there is enough evidence, if you like, to at least look into this further. Now, Downing Street have insisted, as I say, that they're willing to cooperate with this, they're willing to provide clarity if that's what the Standards Commissioner needs. The Labour Party feel that clearly isn't the case. We've heard about a transparency black hole from the Deputy Leader, Labour, Angela Rayner, who says that there are questions to answer here. The Liberal Democrats have accused the Prime Minister of allegedly bending the rules. As I say, though, there is no evidence of wrongdoing at the moment. The Downing Street are very much batting this away, but it is not a good look to be investigated, particularly as a Prime Minister who's tried to distance himself from as much Conservative sleaze as possible, and at the same time someone who is facing local elections in just a couple of weeks' time. So yes, I wouldn't say it is just a storm in a teacup, but innocent until proven guilty. Downing Street deny everything, and we'll have to see what comes out in the wash in what could be a couple of weeks, could be a couple of months. These investigations rarely get wrapped up terribly quickly.
All right, Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor in Westminster, reacting to that news that dropped at around lunchtime that Rishi Sunak is going to be investigated by the Parliament's watchdog. Now, to fears that the UK economy is going to suffer serious damage because we aren't having enough babies. It's down by 12%, the birth rate, in the last 10 years. Viewers on GB News can see how the number of births has fallen down the years. The Office for National Statistics monitors the total fertility rate, which shows the average number of children each woman has. So back in 1964, it peaked at 2.93 in England and Wales, so just under 3. So your average woman was having basically 3 kids. But in 2020, that was down at 1.58, before rising slightly to 1.61 in 2021. I said earlier I had assumed that maybe during the old lockdowns thing that, you know, there would have been a massive baby boom, but apparently people just grew to hate each other and presumably divorced instead. So there we are. One of two ways, isn't it? Well, earlier, I went out and about to find out what you guys think. I actually went to a world-famous maternity ward. It's the Lindo wing just outside here at St Mary's Hospital, and several members of the royal family have been born there, so I thought it was fitting. It was also very convenient because it's just around the corner. Here's what you said.
That's the reason why some of them don't have any kids. Yeah, because they need more money, need planning to have kids. But in our generation, we didn't think about money.
You just cracked on.
Yeah.
I would say that immigration policy needs to be fixed a little bit, especially because there's plenty of people. The population on the globe is, you know, rising higher and higher at higher rates every single day.
Do you think they would feel able to afford to have kids then, or maybe?
No, but it's not the population as a globe. We call ourselves a global economy is decreasing. It's just the economy that we're in at the moment in this country. I mean, no one can buy a house right now, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm 24 years old. The idea of owning a house, being financially stable enough to have kids seems way, way off, probably decades away. And I just don't see myself being able to give a kid that kind of life that they need.
Because I think people are probably more career-driven. And they just, they just want to focus on themselves more and then build themselves where they can get to a better place in their life, and then maybe they might then have kids. But or people are just probably full of themselves and everyone's trying to pick their partners wisely. No.
Oh, do you think this is part? Do you think things like Tinder have had an impact on this?
Yes, because people are so easily accessible to other people now, so everyone probably feels like they're spoilt for choice.
I think it's just because compared to before, women are more career oriented. They want to develop themselves professionally, marry later, and to be fair, kids go in the way of work. And
Can I ask, why did you decide to have a child?
Because I want to make the families.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
You cannot imagine my relief when that woman did confirm to me that she was, in fact, pregnant. So there we go. Joining me now is Tone Jarvis-Mack, who is the Chief Executive of the Fertility Foundation. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Why are we not having enough kids?
Money. Childcare is really expensive. But also, as you know, the WHO came out last week and said that 1 in 6 adults are going to struggle with fertility problems. Now, my service users are certainly looking to have babies and would do anything to have a child, but it all comes back down to money. They can't afford to go through IVF. But on the other side, you're seeing people just saying they're going to wait longer, they want to buy a house. There's all these different factors in, but I think a lot of it just comes down to money.
Do you think we should care less about that? Because there were some people that I spoke to, and I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of people out there at the moment for whom having a family is just the most important thing. Having children is the absolute number one, and they'll make everything else work around that. They'll make their living accommodation situation work. They'll eat affordable food accordingly, all of this stuff. Do you think we're losing that as a generation coming up now? And actually, we do prioritise career and fun, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a big family. I've got 5 brothers, so I know what it's like to have a lot of siblings. But I think the priorities have changed. It is more, there's opportunities to have a better career, to go and travel. But I was brought up where you go get a job, you buy a house, and I did that, and I was very, very fortunate. People are now having to wait longer to get onto the property ladder, and I think they see that as a security option for them to then start a family. You don't want to be living in rented accommodation and with the risks that go with that. But it all just literally just comes back down to this thing: can they afford to have children? If childcare takes up, that could take up one person's salary.
I wonder whether or not it's time we shifted this, and instead of it being like, can we afford to do it, whether or not we should look at it as though it's our duty to at least replace ourselves for humanity's sake and also the sake of our economy going forward. Do you think people, where possible, I am aware, obviously, people can't, and I don't want to be unsympathetic towards those, but do you think, where possible, people should see it as a duty to have at least 2 kids, replace both themselves and their partner?
I mean, I get hundreds of emails and phone calls and messages. We have thousands of people coming through our service each year who are desperate to have one child, let alone 2 children. So if there was more access to them having IVF treatment on the NHS, then definitely there would be more children coming through. Again, I don't think the duty part plays into people as much. And I think the whole cost of living, I think COVID has shifted everyone's mind into how maybe short life is or how fragile life is. And they're like, well, maybe I'll just enjoy my life first.
Yeah, potentially. I do think that, look, the economy side of it, absolutely massively. I can't help but wonder as well, could you tell me a little bit about your, do I call them client-based customers, I suppose, whatever I would call them? Or the people who would come to you seeking advice and help. What are they like? Are they from a complete range of demographics, ages? What are they?
Yeah, I mean, the youngest couple we've just helped, they're due to have their baby in June. They are 26 and 28, ranging right up to people that they're in their 50s who want to have a baby. And it's all walks of life. I mean, there's people that are renting, there's people that are on, they're on benefits that don't have a job. There's people that have very good jobs but still can't afford the basics. They've got, they may have a house and a mortgage and they've got bills to pay and utilities to pay and everything else to go into it. And then they've got to think about adding a child into it. So it literally is this wide spectrum, and you can't just say, oh, just have a baby, it's your duty to the United Kingdom to repopulate everything. But you can't do that. If they can't afford that, then they're not going to do it. I mean, they would love to.
Can you sell the idea of having kids to me, please? Because look, if I'm being completely honest, right? If I'm being completely honest, I'm 31 years old. I I enjoy my life and I have an amount of personal freedom that comes with not having children. I also have an amount of disposable income that comes with not having children. And also, if I'm being really honest with you, Tone, although I think you probably could tell this from the start, sometimes I struggle to look after myself. And so, let alone the potential dangers that would happen with children, why should I have kids?
Well, let me tell you this, right? So the people that come through the Fertility Foundation are desperate to have children. And the amount of people that have had their children, they've gone through IVF, they've done, 3 or 4 rounds, they've spent 50,000, whatever it is, they get to have their baby, they're thinking, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. And they're like, oh my God, this kid's driving me crazy. But that's the reality, children, it's not easy bringing up a child. And that's, once you've had it, that's potentially 18, 20 years of your life now taken up raising someone. So selling it is a really
So you're not
thing.
selling it, basically. All right, okay. Cheers, Dan. Thank you very much, mate. That was great.
Patrick, so I'll sell it to you like this. Having, being able to have a child is the most amazing thing for anyone to do. And I'm, as a gay man, I don't have that opportunity just to, just to go and get pregnant. But helping other people achieve their dreams is everything for me. So, and I get to meet a lot of the children and I get to hand them back at the end. So I get best of both worlds. But,
and hand them back at the end being the key bit, yes. 100%, 100%. All right. Look, thank you very much, Tone. Great stuff. Tone Jarvis-Mack, who is the Chief Executive of the Fertility Foundation. What do you make of that? And there is a very serious point underpinning this, which is that we aren't really, as a nation, having enough kids. That birth rate has dropped and we are not now replacing ourselves. If you cared drastically about humanity, then you could argue, of course, that it's bad for humanity. Certainly bad for the economy, though, isn't it, as well, if we're not breeding enough people. What do you make of all of that? Coming up, more on that maths ambition that the Prime Minister has set out for the UK. Don't worry, there will be more brain teasers for you. The PM wants us to do more maths, right? He wants us to do more maths, and I've been sending you some maths problems. One of them has caused absolute outrage in the inbox because you're all telling me that we're wrong. I've got another maths expert on. We're going to clear this up. I, for one, am desperate to know what on earth Hannah's interest rate is. I know. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's mathematical news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark today. We've hit a landmark today. GB News can reveal that more than 5,000 people have now crossed the channel on small boats so far this year. So there we go. Viewers will be able to see some of the migrants who arrived in Dover this very morning. There they are. Around 120 people crossed the channel today alone. And official Home Office figures show that 37 people arrived on one boat yesterday. Last year was a record year, a record number of 45,756 migrants crossed the channel. But sources have told GB News that the Home Office officials are planning for the possibility of double that number arriving this year. So up to the old 90,000 mark. Clearly, nothing is working as a deterrent, is it? And Rishi Sunak's plan to stop the boats, that was the only bit of his 5-point plan that really had any jeopardy in it, I think. You know, people expected the hospital waiting times to be slashed. People expected maybe there to be a bit more growth and all of this stuff in the economy. I think that was the one area, wasn't it, where everyone looked at it and went, can you absolutely promise that, Rishi? And it looking like he can't, can he? But there we go. Anyway, the news of the investigation into the Prime Minister has overshadowed his call for pupils to study maths. And if you're just joining us, it's because the Prime Minister has now been referred to the parliamentary watchdog over some allegations about whether or not he declared interest in relation to his wife's own interest into a nursery. Anyway, there we go. He wants us all to study maths right up until people leave school at the age of 18. In a speech this morning, Rishi Sunak said that his plans will help bring maths to life. Woo. And make the subject a key skill, every bit as essential as reading. But opposition parties say that he's guilty of getting his sums wrong, as there aren't enough maths teachers to actually achieve his ambition. Here is what Rishi Sunak had to say.
We're in the process of making maths more accessible, building our children's confidence so that they don't fear maths. We're creating more sector-specific content that can excite young people about the relevance of maths for the careers that they aspire to help teachers bring maths to life in the classroom, from building sets for school plays to calculating the angles of free kicks or the speed of a Formula One car. We're extending our maths hubs, unique partnerships of expert schools that support maths teaching. And we're strengthening maths in primary schools, including with a new, fully funded professional qualification for those that are teaching it. But we also need to address a very specific problem that's causing us to fall behind the rest of the world. We're one of the few developed countries where young people don't routinely study some form of maths up to the age of 18. They do it in Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Finland, Japan, Norway, and America. Why should we accept any less for our children? Of course we shouldn't. That's why I set out in January that we're going to change the way our system works, so that everyone in our country will study some form of maths all the way to 18.
OK, so that's Rishi Sunak doing his best to sell maths to the nation there. Now, people like me, who are absolutely rubbish at maths, like to use the excuse, oh, well, I don't really use maths in my day-to-day life, so I don't really need it, OK, which angers other people. I did quite like what Rishi Sunak said there about, you know, we use maths all the time, don't we? From maybe calculating what angle to hit that free kick at. I mean, the idea of David Beckham doing maths equations in his head just before he ran up to a ball in front of the Stretford end, I think is fanciful, isn't it? Anyway, Callum Robertson joins me now, who's a teacher and an education policy commentator. Thank you very much for joining us, Callum. How important is maths? Why should I be bothered about this? Is he onto a loser here by making kids do more maths?
Sure. So, I will very happily admit I
was not very good at maths at school. I'm a teacher now. I don't teach maths. But I think what we need to focus on is why he's pursuing this policy. So the statistics from the National Audit Office tell us that it's costing our economy about £20 billion a year, or 1.3% of our GDP. Maths friends out there. So what does that mean? That means that jobs are going to other countries when we could be nurturing talent here in Britain. So I agree with his diagnosis, but where he gets it wrong is he's got the wrong solution in mind. The idea of forcing students to study a maths alone qualification until they're 18 is flawed for a number of reasons, up to including we physically don't have enough teachers. And that's a long-term problem because you have to train teachers. That's not going to change soon. So, but we should not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We need to reform our wider post-16 curriculum to include the teaching of data and statistics and maths adjacent subjects within wider subjects, and actually increase our maths.
But is this just forgive me, Callum? Let me play devil's advocate here, all right? Because I was that kid at school that you would have hated to teach, okay? Because for the obvious reason, there is a reason why people always email in and say that I look and act like Ben from Outnumbered. That's because that's who I am. That's who I've always been, and unfortunately, it's who I always will be. Should people, dare I say it a bit like me, have not been encouraged from the age of 16 to just give up maths, write it off, and instead go and get a practical trade, like become a mechanic or something? Because now I've got the worst of both worlds. I can't do maths, I hate it, and I can't change a tyre on my car.
Sure. Now, I can see the sympathy for that argument. I think where we really, really need to focus is we need to focus on practical maths. So instead of sort of forcing students to study algebra and Pythagoras until 18, let's get them using data and statistics, stuff that the jobs of the 21st century require. So, for example, I teach politics. In politics, you require the ability to understand data, understand elections, things like that. That's something where actually practically it can help people understand things. History, for example, you've got to understand sources. If you can't understand the data that's in front of you, that's going to be really flawed. So that's what we focus our efforts with post-16 maths into, not algebra and Pythagoras.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. No, I think I'll humanise it a little bit, like you said, about, working out your angles of a free kick or something like that. But look, thank you very much, Callum. Great to have you on the show as ever. Now, I was going to put you to the test with a maths question, but I think you just said you're a politics teacher.
Go for it.
All right, then. Fair enough. Let's go. Get a load of this. Are you ready? Strap yourself in, Callum. All right. Now, this has caused mass controversy, this, in the inbox. Hannah deposits £800 into a bank, which pays 4.5% simple interest a year. Work out what interest the bank pays over 3 years. Any joy, Callum? So he's working it out in his head now. I'll do a running commentary. You can see the cogs of his mind turning as the eyes roll to the back of his head. Probably quite off-putting this for him, as he's got me churning on into his ear. 5, 4...
£108.
Yes, you legend. Well done. £108. Good lad. All right. He said maths can't be fun. Thank you very much. The answer is indeed £108. And if I found out that you'd watched this show earlier and rewound it and found out the answer from that, I will come round there. Callum Robertson, ladies and gentlemen, who is a very good teacher, clearly, and an education and policy commentator. Now, the controversy in this inbox, for everyone going, it's not £108 at all. A chap who's been in touch called Toad, so you know it's good, has said that actually it's you who are thick. I'll say it. He goes, I've just caught the tail end of the interest question. The whole thing revolves around the expression simple interest. See what we did there? The correct answer is £108, which would have been 3 times 36. It seems many of your viewers are using the calculation based on compound interest, which is clearly erroneous. So there you go. Thank you very much, Toad. So you can all stop with the hate now, people. Anyway, right, OK, there's still lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock, believe it or not. After the Grand National was disrupted by animal rights protesters, we will debate whether the race should be scrapped and who is responsible for the deaths of those horses. Was it the protesters themselves, or is it the fact that they were being ridden? And things go from bad to worse for Nicola Sturgeon as calls for her to be suspended by the SNP get even louder. What on earth is going on in Scotland? But right now, it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you. It's 5:31. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak's under investigation by Parliament's ethics watchdog over a possible failure to declare an interest. Downing Street says the inquiries over claims he failed to tell MPs his wife might benefit from a major measure announced in last month's budget. She holds shares in Koru Kids, a childcare agency likely to gain financially from a drive to get more people to become childminders. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will clarify how it was declared as a ministerial interest rather than to the Commons. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak says poor numeracy and an anti-maths mindset is costing the UK economy tens of billions of pounds every year. The Prime Minister is setting up a review to ensure maths is studied by all students in England up to the age of 18 without making it a compulsory A-level. He's also criticised the culture that it's OK to be bad at maths, claiming it leaves people twice as likely to be unemployed than those with competent skills. SpaceX has called off the launch of the world's most powerful rocket, Starship. It was due to take off this afternoon for the first time, but in the last few moments, a pressure valve became frozen. The team, which is in Texas, will continue a dress rehearsal instead. A minimum of 48 hours is needed before a second attempt of the launch. Earlier, Elon Musk said anything that doesn't result in the destruction of the launch pad would be a win. And a French court has cleared a European plane maker, Airbus and Air France, of involuntary manslaughter nearly 14 years after a plane travelling from Brazil to France crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The trial was France's first ever for corporate manslaughter, with both firms pleading not guilty. It found several acts of negligence by both companies, but that wasn't enough for full liability for the crash. 228 people lost their lives on the flight travelling from Rio to Paris in June 2009. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2355 and 1.1321 euros. The price of gold is £1,609.92 per ounce. And the FTSE 100s closed at 7,879 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
What on earth is going on with Nicola Sturgeon? Scotland's first new minister, Humza Yousaf, is coming under increasing pressure to suspend the former party leader. But earlier, he said there's no case against her. In a video leaked to the Mail on Sunday newspaper, Sturgeon apparently tried to play down the party's financial problems when speaking to its NEC. She claimed the party had, quotes, never been in a stronger financial position and to be careful about what suggestions that there were problems. OK. It was reportedly filmed in 2021, just days before police started to investigate the SNP finances, and that led to the arrest of Sturgeon's husband, the former SNP chief executive, Peter Murrell. He was released without charge pending further investigation. Let's speak now to Stuart Crawford, political commentator and former SNP member. Stuart, thank you very much. Would it be better for everyone in the SNP if Nicola Sturgeon just fully disappeared and resigned as an MSP and just did one?
Good evening, Patrick. I think the short answer to that is probably yes. It's very difficult to keep up with political developments north of Hadrian's Wall at the moment, as there's a constant drip of information coming out from the SNP and from the Scottish Government. You and I were probably familiar with crisis management. And one of the basic rules is, if you're caught out, is to front up with all the information at the same time, presented by the most senior person available, take the hit, and the media story will go away. Whoever is doing the SNP's media communications at the moment is drawing their money under false pretenses, because this is just an unfolding car crash disaster in PR terms.
I've rarely seen Yeah, I've rarely seen anyone's political legacy and reputation unravel this quickly and so spectacularly. But just what is so bad? What is so bad about there being footage that emerges over the weekend of Nicola Sturgeon, the then First Minister of Scotland in 2021, saying the party has never been in a better financial position? What was so wrong about that? And why is that important now in the light of what we know now, or think we know now?
I think the answer to that is that it's wrong. And the big question is, of course, whether Nicola Sturgeon knew that it was wrong when she presented the information in that video to the National Executive Council or Committee, which is the sort of ruling body of the SNP, if you like. If it was the willful presentation of untrue information, then there are severe implications for that, because basically people were being conned. And the people I feel sorriest for, apart from the electorate as a whole, are those who put their faith in the SNP and in Nicola Sturgeon and in her party and contributed funds, often from limited personal finances, to keep the dream alive. And they must feel totally betrayed at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Look, thank you very, very much for your input on this. It's very much a case of watch this space. And I am sure that our viewers and listeners will appreciate we cannot sit here and just wildly speculate, but I think we all hope that the reality comes to light at some point soon. And there you go. Stuart Crawford, there is a political commentator and former SNP member. Nearly 200,000 hospital appointments and procedures in England had to be rescheduled due to the strike by junior doctors from April 11th to 15th. This is some breaking news for you, so I will start it again. So nearly 200,000 hospital appointments and procedures in England had to be rescheduled due to the strike by junior doctors from April the 11th to the 15th. That's according to provisional data from NHS England. Some 20,470 inpatient procedures were rescheduled, along with 175,755 outpatient appointments, making a total of 196,225. An average of 26,145 staff per day were absent from work as a result of industrial action. So there we have, and it's breaking to us just now, the preliminary figures, the provisional data of the impact that the junior doctors' strike had on NHS England. So there we go. So in terms of the amount of appointments that were cancelled, the amount of procedures that were rescheduled, and the amount of outpatient appointments that were cancelled. In total, all of that is 196,225 just from the 11th to the 15th of April, and an average of 26,145 staff per day were absent from work. When you add that to the figures that came out that excess deaths tripled during the last junior doctor strike, how does that make you feel? Do you feel very different about nurses going on strike than junior doctors? If so, why? That is a staggering impact on our National Health Service there, a staggering impact. And if it continues, which it will, then no doubt it will get even worse. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Moving away from that now, though, animal rights activists want the Grand National to be banned after a horse died during Saturday's race. But who is to blame for the death of that horse? Is it the people who disrupted the race and, quote, spooked the horses? Or is it the fact that they were in the race to begin with? Who is to blame for the horse's death? Do you think that horse racing has had its day in the modern age? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. Animal rights protesters delayed the start of the Grand National on Saturday, and they've been accused of contributing to the death of a horse in the race. Police officers arrested 118 people after scores of activists climbed fences. At least 2 fixed themselves to a jump using glue and lock-on devices, according to the group Animal Rising. Hill 16 died after falling at the first fence, and his trainer Sandy Thompson said that the later start was partly to blame, i.e. it spooked the horses, and that's part of the problem why the horse died, OK? Joining me now is Margarita Tachova, who is Peter's Senior Digital Marketing Manager, and Derek Tomo Thompson, and horse racing presenter and commentator. Thank you very much. Great to have you both on the show. Look, Derek, I'll start with you. One of the owners of Sally the horse who died has basically blamed the activists for that death. So I am asking, in your view, who killed the horse? Is it the activists, or is it indeed the race itself?
No, it was so sad. I mean, first of all, you've got to feel so sad. Any horse that, you know, the stable lad's looking after a horse and it doesn't come back and there's an empty stable there. It's a horrible thing. It's sad. It happens. But that certainly helped, if that's the right word, because when you're on a race and you're in the 5:15 and you're all G'd up, you know what it's like if you're running out in the pitch of the cup final, say, or anything like that. And the horses are the same. The race was delayed. The horses had to go back. They were all keyed up for it. And then they had a start. There were 40 runners going towards the first. And sadly, these things happen. So it was possibly the delay. I know Sandy Thompson was very upset, and rightly so. And he broke his neck, and there's sadly nothing we can do. And there's an empty stable there. But the Grand National is still the greatest race in the world.
OK. Margarita, I will bring you in now. You are, of course, Peter's Senior Digital Marketing Manager. Do you think that the activists are responsible for this horse's death?
Well, thank you so much for having me here tonight. And the death of Hill 16 is not the isolated case. There were 2 other horses who lost their lives as the result of Grand National Festival last week. And last year we saw 4 other horses who were killed during Grand National Festival. And then since the year 2000, we had 62 horses who died during Grand National Festival. So this race is deadly. And you may call it the greatest race. I would call it the Grand National shame or grand national disgrace. As what we're essentially doing, we are pushing horses beyond their limits. We know that fractures, broken necks, broken limbs, bloody lungs, heart attacks, all these things are commonplace in Grand National and in other races. So the only way to make sure the horses are safe is to ban such races, is not to force them to, go beyond their limits.
All right, Derek, I spoke to a representative from Animal Rising earlier on this very show, and he promised me live on air that this is just the tip of the iceberg and that they are going to be protesting it all over the place. Anything animal related to do with sport, they're going to be all over it like a rash. Derek, I'll ask you, do you think in a modern world where more and more people are going vegan than ever before, horse racing is on the way out?
No, certainly not, because horse racing is something I've been in all my life. I've ridden ponies. Now, what do you do with the horse if he's not looked after, if he's not training? What do you do? Turn him out in a field? I was actually talking to a former trainer this morning outside my house, and she said the horses that she had in a stable were more injured when they were turned out into a field, when they were bucking and kicking and all that, than when they were on the race course. These horses are very well trained. They're very, very well looked after. They're taught to jump in the best possible way. Obviously, these things happen. You could get killed walking outside your front door. These things happen. They're tragic. But the Grand National is the greatest steeplechase in the world. And let me just give you an example. 40 years ago, my best friend, Bob Champion, had cancer. He was nearly dead, but he wanted to come back and ride the winner of the Grand National. And that got him through the cancer. That got him back on a horse. And he rode the winner of the Grand National. And to this day, he's raised over £18 million for the Bob Champion Cancer Trust, which has helped people like you and me.
OK, all right. And Margarita, I'll put that back to you. With absolute respect, has the horse racing industry not done a lot more for our economy and the well-being, I suppose, of humans and giving more horses life than you've ever done?
Well, I mean, I would say that horse racing is essentially a stain on the UK. It's a stain on their reputation as a nation that cares about animals. And our ethical standards are surely high enough to appreciate that horses are sensitive, intelligent individuals who don't deserve to be forced to race, who don't deserve to be whipped, who don't deserve to be put in this risk. And also don't forget about, all the ex-racing horses. If you have watched BBC Panorama's The Dark Side of Horse Racing, you probably know that thousands of ex-racing horses from the UK and Ireland are sent to slaughter every single year. So it's not how we should be treating animals.
Derek,
and, horses are never willing participants in this race. It's jockeys and horse owners who care about glory and money, not the horses.
Two key points there for me there, Derek. That horses are never willing participants in a race and that once they retire, they are presumably gratuitously slaughtered. Your views?
Yeah. Listen, first of all, I find that abhorrent what that lady is saying. Nobody loves horses more than people like me and people who look after them, to ride them and everything. And also, if a horse falls in a race, you've noticed that they actually gallops on and jumps the fences. It wouldn't do that if it didn't enjoy what it was doing. And I find that absolutely insulting. I love horses. We all do. And horses have played a big part. Before we had motor cars, where did we get from A to B? How did we do it? With horses.
Well, that is a good. Is a good point. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Just on the idea that they're slaughtered after they've finished racing, Derek. Go on.
No, but seriously, first of all, horses are not like humans. If you break your leg, if any of us three break a leg, we go to hospital, we're off for 2 or 3 months or whatever, and the leg gets right again. You can't say to a horse, lie down for 3 months and the leg will get better. You can't do that. Unfortunately, that's the same anywhere in the world. So you've got to bear that in mind. Horses are horses.
OK, but Margarita, I'll give the final word to you on this. What about all of the human beings who rely on the horse racing industry in order to survive, in order to make a living, in order to make their livelihoods and put food on the table for their families? If we just stop the horse racing industry, then a lot of those actual human beings might suffer.
Well, as humans, we evolved, as society, we evolve, and we've seen so many industries evolving, and we've seen people finding, other ways to adapt. But I think it's absolutely unnecessary, and it's utterly cruel to put horses through the ordeal of racing, having 40 of them racing one next to each other, and they're deliberately punishing racecourse with obstacles that include jumps and pitches and
just to say, Margarita. Fine. I get what you're saying. And I know there are a lot of people that agree with you. Do we do the same? Is this the thin end of the wedge? Do we end up doing this for rugby, Margarita? Because a bunch of grown men are charging headfirst into each other at full pace, and a couple of them every single year, or a few of them every single year, might break their necks and die. Do we then stop rugby?
Oh, thanks for bringing it, Patrick. Like in rugby, people who participate are willing participants. They can give consent, while horses do not. And every single person who is who wants to watch a race or who wants to watch some sports, and I get the thrill and the excitement of placing a bet and watching it. So watch rugby, watch Formula One, watch Olympics, London Marathon. There are so many different events when humans are willing participants. And I'll leave you with one last thing. Imagine if there was a sport where the death rate was as high as in horse racing, but it was humans who were killed. Every single year, 200 horses are killed on British racetracks. Say if it was a death rate in
it's an interesting point. It is an interesting point. And for what it's worth, in the interest of balance on this, I have, if you'll excuse the pun, been on the fence about horse racing for a very long time. So I can see both sides of this, and I hope you both feel heard. So thank you very much. Margarita Sachova, there, who's Peter's Senior Digital Marketing Manager, and Derek Tomo Thompson, and horse racing presenter and commentator and legend, actually. Absolute legend. Right, that is very nearly it from me today. But instead of Michelle Dewberry, it is Emily Carver who'll be filling in for Jubes & Co. for the next hour. What's on the show?
I will be indeed. Have you seen that the anti-monarchist group, Republic, have been talking about how they're underrepresented in the media when it comes to royal coverage? So we've got the coronation coming. They think that there should be lots of anti-royal coverage when we're talking about the coronation.
About that is we tried to get Republic on this show and they were busy.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that will be an excellent talking point for the next hour. So there you go.
We tried to give them the airtime that they want and we couldn't.
Right. So what are they complaining about then? We'll find out. But yes, if viewers have any strong feelings about that, are we too fawning over the royals, perhaps, in our coverage? Sycophantic, even?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
It'd be a bit odd, though, to be covering the coronation and have some angry anti-monarchist Republic on the panel just saying, oh, we shouldn't even be here.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, like golden carriage, of course, as we all know, built by slaves 600 years ago. I mean, it'd just be boring, wouldn't it? We couldn't have all of that.
But we're also going to be talking about landlords, because I'm concerned about the number of landlords who have decided to just leave the market. Where does that leave renters? You know, we all need homes. So that's a concern.
What are your views, just out of interest, on the birth rate being so low?
Well, I should probably have some kids.
Right. OK, on that note, Emily Carver will be with you for the next hour here on GB News, filling in for Jubes & Co. It'll be an absolute rip-roarer of a show. Thank you very much, everyone who's been emailing in and getting in touch with your views throughout the course of this show. I will be back again tomorrow at 3 p.m, where no doubt it will be more hilarity. And I promise you, I will not ask you to do any flipping maths questions tomorrow. Patrick Christys, GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, I'm Claire Nazir, and here are your weather headlines for the next 24 hours. We're chasing cloud. There will be some warm sunshine developing tomorrow, like today, but feeling cooler in the east. Now, here's your high-pressure system, which has kept things relatively settled through the last 24 hours. It's extended down from Scandinavia. However, through the next few days, a bit of a squeeze on the isobars, allowing for a stronger wind. In fact, through this evening and overnight, there will be some clearer skies, the cloud melting away. But at the same time, this cloud here will slowly drift in from the North Sea, low cloud at that. You can see the wind picking up across the North Sea. So as we head into Tuesday morning, a few starry skies towards the west, more cloud further east, and this cloud will be relatively persistent. However, it will slowly break. Through the day, we'll see some brighter skies emerging yet again, feeling warm in the sunshine, particularly across western Scotland, northwest England, West Wales. But that breeze keeping things a bit cooler towards the east as well as the southeast, and a little bit more cloud later on towards the southeast, where we could see one or two very light and fleeting showers. West will be best, temperatures 17 or 18 degrees Celsius. So that's the picture on Tuesday. Through Tuesday evening and overnight, pretty much a repeat performance. Yet again, we have that keen wind coming in from the east-northeast, delivering more cloud from time to time, and also those lower temperatures feeling cool along this eastern and southern side. A little showery rain to start the day, perhaps across the far south on Wednesday, but some brighter skies elsewhere. Certainly a fine day yet again for Scotland, northwest England, as well as Northern Ireland, and some holes in the cloud across the Midlands, as well as East Anglia for a time. So the cloud will come and go, but that wind will keep temperatures around 12 or 13 along this east coast. Elsewhere, we could see the mid-teens. So here's your outlook through the next few days, turning unsettled into next weekend.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost,